Breaker, good buddies. This is Creepy Vibes Midnight Hauler on the mic. Today we're rolling deep into the heart of Texas, where the blacktop stretches past the horizon, and ancient terrors ride shotgun just out of sight. Strap in for 20 bone-chilling hauls, phantom lights flickering over bayou waters, restless spirits hitching a ride on lonely highways, and forces older than this rigged steel that should have stayed buried. But don't be a rookie, most drivers cruise off before hitting subscribe and miss the real scares. Tap that subscribe button now like you're flooring the throttle on a midnight run. So punch in your location and local time in the comments. Where are you tuning in from? And what's your clock reading? Over and out. Let's fire up those headlights and kick off story number 1. The dusk pressed in low and heavy over Black River Road, turning the pines and oaks into dark sentinels that reached their branches toward the tanker's cab like accusing fingers. Mason Clark's eyes stung from the late summer dust that clung to his eyelashes. Every breath he drew carried the faint tang of crude oil, the monotone hum of his rig's engine a lullaby that bordered on menace. Mile after mile of two-lane blacktop unraveled ahead of him, the yellow stripes bobbing under, his headlights like the pulse of some slumbering creature. He'd run this route countless times, hauling crude from the wells along the Sabine to the refinery yard just outside Beaumont, down the run in his sleep. Done it so often the diesel groove in his mind ran deeper than the grooves in the worn steering wheel. Tonight, though, felt different. It started with a flicker in his mirror, that tiny flash of red nestled in the trunks and underbrush beside the shoulder, a faint glow like an unblinking eye. He caught himself glancing again, just a reflex, and blinked away the glare only to find nothing but shadows. He told himself it was a trick of the trees, stray light from his own brake lamps bouncing back into the mirror. He tapped the switch and dipped his lights, then raised them, trying to chase down the source. But Black River Road gave up neither answer nor apology. The red gleam vanished. He chalked it up to nerves or fatigue. Midnight runs could make a man see things. Still, when the next mile rolled past, he caught it again. A pair of eyes, ruby bright, hovering low at the road's edge. He jammed on. His brakes, the tanker shuddering under him as gravel spit from the tires. His heart slammed against his ribs. In the cracked glare of his cab light, he saw those eyes reflect again, closer now, and his mouth went dry. He keyed the mic on his CB. Breaker 19, anybody out there? The crackle came back, but no voice. Only static. Mason reached for the two-way, palm slick with sweat, and cursed under his breath. He eased forward, keeping his speed under 30, scanning the undergrowth. The radio hummed a half-melody of interference. His rig felt suddenly unbalanced. He glanced at the load gauge and frowned as the needle wavered from green toward yellow. It was normal to dip when he braked, but this felt wilder, like the tanker itself was alive and eager. His knuckles whitened. On the wheel, a mile later, the eyes appeared again, but this time they floated below the tanker's side, ghosting across the reflection of the chrome rim. He jerked left to aim his headlamp at the undercarriage only to see nothing. He hunched closer, heart hammering, breath shallow. Yet in the mirror, flames of red glowed, crawling up the length of his trailer as if some creature was climbing in his wake. He gripped the wheel, cold sweat mingling with the dust on his arms. He forced calm. Breathe, Mason. He killed the engine, flicked on the 4 ways, and climbed down onto melting asphalt. The air slapped him with humidity and the smell of pine resin. He circled the trailer, flashlight trembling in his grip, hunting for a leak or a loose fitting. The black metal underbelly gleamed in the beam. He crouched to peer at the axles. Everything was tight, the grease cups full. No oil puddles. No mechanical anomaly. Only silence and that rolling heat from the road. He patted each tire, hiss of rubber against leather gloves. All felt cold and firm. He shined the light toward Lincoln's, face painted on the wheel hub, an old decal he'd slapped on for luck. He cracked a nervous laugh. "Lucky penny," he murmured. "Not now, boy." And yet once more he saw the red reflection snaking along the axle like the eyes were tracing the hubs, peering out from beneath the wheel wells, clambering back. Up, he swore he heard faint footsteps on gravel. No heavy boots, but a kind of soft scrape coming from behind the rig. Inside the cab, he slammed the door, locked it. The engine roared to life, headlights slicing the darkness. He gunned the diesel, and the tanker lurched forward, tires spitting stones. He glanced at the mirrors, nothing. But in his peripheral vision, on the shoulder, a hunched shape melted back into the trees, its eyes forgotten and found again when the light swept past. He slammed the rig into drive and sped on, cursing every mile maker. The highway curved, the road signs blurred. The radio came alive with static voices, words indecipherable, like 1,000 whispers slithering through the cables. He flicked through channels, desperate for a friendly voice, but all he caught were fragments. "Don't look. Keeper of the road. My eyes." He slammed the radio off and felt a moment of peace before a harsh crack tore through the speakers. A single word: mine. He froze, hand on the gear shift, heart jumping. "Who's there?" He barked, to echo in his own cab. Silence swallowed his words. Then the tanker shuddered violently, as if something beneath had seized the axle. The rumble climbed through the hitch into his seat until his teeth rattled. He yanked the wheel left, but the rig fishtailed. The red eyes flickered in the mirror, close enough now that he could count their twin orbs, two coals burning with malicious intelligence. They weren't reflection. They were windows to a thing that rode with him, fused to his trailer. He prayed. For the next turnout, swore he saw brake lights in the distance, maybe a fellow trucker. He flicked the flashers and lifted his arm to signal, only to realize the lights behind were on his own rig. Those taillights glowed unnaturally bright, like lanterns lit from within. He slammed the brakes, skidded sideways. The tanker fishtailed. Across both lanes, gravel screeched on the embankment, and he cursed the rainless summer night. When he finally clawed the rig back into a straight line, shearing off the road, he found himself on a narrow gravel turnout beneath a gnarled cypress, whose roots clawed the shoulder. He powered down the engine and sat in the unnerving quiet. He thought he might vomit. He unbuckled and stepped into the humid air, heart thudding. He circled the front, traced the tanker's length with his light. No eyes in the mirror, no glowing coals, only his jolted reflection staring back from the hubcaps. He returned to the cab, shaking. Engine off, he fumbled for his phone, no signal. Nothing. He punched the dash light on, opened the glove box, pulled out an old switchblade by reflex. He clicked it open. The blade snapped with authority. "Enough," he whispered. He stood at the side of the cab, stared at the tanker's belly where he'd seen the eyes. "If you want me, come get me," he said, voice ragged. The night answered with rustle of leaves. Then he heard it, a wet, sliding thump, like flesh dragged across metal, coming from beneath the trailer. His flashlight beam wavered as he tore toward the sound, only to catch, for a heartbeat, a pair of red eyes that blinked, shifted, then vanished into darkness. He stumbled backwards, tripped over a loose stone, blade clattered on the gravel. He scrambled up, heart hammering in his ears. He tore back to the cab, slammed the door, locked it. He threw it into gear, gunned the engine. The truck leapt like a startled animal. He raced back onto Black River Road, tires spitting pebbles. As he passed the cypress turnout, he caught something in the mirror, a massive silhouette beneath the tanker, limbs too long and joints crooked, head hanging low like an injured hound, and glowing eyes fixed on him, unblinking. The silhouette slithered alongside the wheel, following as he sped away. Mason's hand shook on the wheel. He fought to hold the rig straight, tears stinging his eyes. The endless dark closed in around him, the engine's growl a challenged shout. The red eyes pulsed in the mirror, and for a ragged moment, he saw two blazing pinpricks of light dancing through the trees behind him. Then they merged into a line, stretching out like a blood-red horizon. He floored the accelerator, terrified of the void ahead but more terrified of what trailed behind. Black River Road stretched before him, endless and unyielding. The tankers. Load gauge jumped erratically, the metal beneath his feet thrumming with a life that was not his own. He drove until the road dumped him onto the 4-lane, until the refinery's lights winked at him like a promise of safety, until the red eyes faded with every mile marker. When he finally coasted into the yard, idle and shaking, mechanics swarmed. His rig with flashlights. Mason barely heard their questions. He stumbled down, leaned against the cab. The undercarriage dripped faintly, but they found no leaks, no sign of wear. Only his wild eyes and matted hair told the tale. He never ran that route again. He took the long way round through padded highways and city lights, but sometimes, at night sometimes when the moon's thin and red, he dreams of those eyes, glowing beneath the tanker, creeping closer, waiting for the engine to die so they can claim their ride. And he wonders whether one day, without warning, they'll climb inside for good. I was rolling through East Texas at midnight, the rig's headlights slicing through the low-hanging fog like twin scalpels. The highway stretched empty ahead, a ribbon of cracked asphalt cutting through fields of knee-high grass whispering under the moon. My name's Rusty Harper, and I'd been hauling frozen catfish from Beaumont to Amarillo Strait through the heart of nowhere. I just crossed the Red River when the motor coughed, shuddered, then died altogether. No warning, just silence. I eased the truck onto the gravel shoulder and killed the ignition. The world went black. I crawled out into the damp air, my boots sinking into soft gravel. I popped the hood and stared at a maze of wires and grime. No idea what was wrong. On a lark, I reached into the sleeper cab for my old CB mic, its silver. Grill pocked with rust. I keyed the switch and tapped the mic. Breaker, breaker, anyone out there? The static rattled my brain, then settled into the faint hum of distant thunder. I sighed and let the mic drop, a crackle. Breaker, this is Charlie. You copy? The voice was smooth, southern drawl like molasses leaking off a spoon comb, assured. But I'd never heard it before. Who's Charlie? I lifted the mic. No truckers around for miles. I'm a friend, the voice said, low and confident. Got you stranded. What's the trouble? I wiped grease on my jeans. Truck's dead. No juice. Got any pointers? The line went silent. I fiddled with knobs, backlit numbers glowing pale green. Battery 17, alternator 50, no meaningful diagnosis to me. A storm rolled in low wind rattling signposts. I was about to slam the hood shut when static flared, and a whispered voice drifted over the frequency. Remember that night at Lake Granbury? I froze. Lake Granbury. 2 years back my wife and I took the kids camping there. First time. Since Becky's miscarriage? I remember driving the boat out past the lights. The water black as oil. Becky laughed. The kids squealed. Then Blaine, my boy, drowned. One moment he was splashing, the next he wasn't. I dove beneath the surface, arms clawing through cold water. Found his jacket, wet with that oily bloom. But no Blaine. They pulled him up hours later, blue lips, glassy eyes. I never told anyone how I'd seen something in that water. Something grinning. I looked at the mic. Who said that? My voice. Trembled. Static crackled. Then the voice, Charlie, soft and close. You remember, don't you? How it felt to sink, to lose him. My chest tightened. I tasted blood. Memory washed over me. Blaine's little hand drifting away, the final look in his eyes. I swallowed hard. Who the hell are you? I rasped. The CB spat back, warped breathing, half whisper, half laugh. Charlie, it said. I'm Charlie. I slammed the hood, heart pounding. Adrenaline lit my veins. I rushed back to the cab, yanked the door open. Rain pelted the roof in heavy drums. I flicked the switch. The dash lit, needles hopped back into place. The engine turned over at the first crank, roaring like a beast unleashed. I swore under my breath. Thanks, Charlie, I muttered, easing. Back onto the blacktop dot, the rig lurched forward. I stared in the rearview mirror. The shoulder was empty, no flash of headlights, just rain streaking off the taillights. I flicked the mic. You okay back there? I said with false cheer. Silence. The static hummed. Then, faint, behind me. A second engine, another rig idling on that same shoulder. I froze. The cab lantern swung, then clicked off. I squinted. The rain blurred shapes, but I glimpsed the outline of a semi-identical to mine park just behind. No lights, no name on the door plate, just the hulking shape waiting. I rolled down the window, a crack, wind howling. Hey you, I shouted, but the echo swallowed my words. The other rig's engine shut off. Darkness pressed in. I tapped the mic. Charlie, you there? That you? Static, then that silky voice right in my ear. Closer now, Rusty. Watching. My skin crawled. Every coil of muscle in my body screamed to leave, but my rig felt glued. Tires stuck in mud. The second rig's brake lights pulsed once, twice, then vanished. The wheels spun, sprayed gravel, but the files of rain-blown grass. Beside the road opened into black water. My headlights picked up the edge of a ditch, a mirror of Lake Granbury's surface. My chest froze. The radio crackled. Your boy is thirsty. A child's breath. Then Blaine's voice, soft and trembling. Daddy? I snapped left into the ditch, tires sinking. Mother of God. I fishtailed, swore, then the truck lurched into that shallow water. The axle hit something solid. The whole rig halted, rocking. Rain clattered on the roof. In the mirror, the shape of the other rig edged toward me. Headlights. Off, engine silent. In the cab, everything went black. The radio spat one last message in Charlie's voice. Now we both sink. The lights flickered back. I was submerged up to the cab floor. Water seeped through the door seals, rising. I clawed the earbud microphone from its cradle, held it to my ear. Stop this. I screamed. The CB crackled. Charlie's voice was all around, echoing inside the cab, beneath the water. You can't outrun the deep, Rusty. Not now. I jammed the mic against the window. The water was almost to my knees. I braced with one hand on the wheel, the other yanking the door open. I could taste mud oil. The world tilted. I plunged into the cold. The water closed over my head, tugging clothes and boots. I kicked out, surfacing in the ditch, gasping. Rain lashed my face. The ditch spilled into a roadside pond, rings pulsing from the drop of a single raindrop. I looked back at where the cab should be, only dark water rippling. No second rig. My heart hammered through my chest, lungs burning. The CB mic floated free, radio lights flickering underwater like morning candles. I staggered off the highway. Toward a distant glow, maybe a farmhouse, maybe a neon sign. Every step squelched. The night pressed tight, hungry. A low hum rolled across the water. The ditch behind me resonated, then became a crash, a dozen pounding thumps. My breath caught. Not rain footsteps. Heavy ones, moving in water, coming. Closer. I dared not turn. My legs burned. Panic drove me faster toward that glow dot up ahead. A lone street lamp flickered beside a cottonwood fence. I reached it and gasped at the sight. Etched into wet boards, words carved "Deep Charlie Don't." SURF. My vision blurred. My hand shook as I pressed numb fingertips to the carving. Behind me, the footsteps paused at the water's edge. Then someone laughed a child's laugh, half playful, half broken. My mind snapped. I dropped the mic and ran. The beam of the street lamp swung, illuminating the highway for a brief second before dying. In the darkness, a rig idled, engine whispering. The silhouette of a cab glowed faintly. I knew I wouldn't make it past that rig. I couldn't stop to think. I sprinted across the road, skidded down the embankment into tall grass that swallowed me. The laughter followed, echoing in my skull. I don't remember reaching the farmhouse. I must have crawled through the yard, banged on the door. The porch light came on, then I was inside, shaking, soaking wet, begging for help. They called State Patrol. They called my dispatcher. They asked questions, but the rigs were gone. No damage to the highway, no oil slick, no dead fish in the T. Water. They said maybe I'd hit a deer. I stared at the stretch of road an hour later and saw nothing but fog. That night, I packed my gear and left. No more runs. I sold the rig to a naive kid in Corpus. But every night, I hear a crackle in the static, a whisper crawling across the frequency. Breaker, breaker, anyone copy? And I remembered the feel of mud under my boots, the taste of that black water, Blaine's final cry. I leave channels. Clear, but I don't answer. If I do, I know I'll hear Charlie's voice again. And I've learned you don't argue with voices in the deep. You just drive on. I hadn't meant to pull off at that old gravel lane, not if I'd known the silo was still standing. The sun was slipping behind ragged clouds, painting the horizon in bruised purples and grays, and my rig's headlights cut through the gathering. Dusk like hungry eyes. I was halfway between Amarillo and Lubbock, hauling 20 tons of milo grain to a feed mill just outside Plainview. My days and nights in this business had taught me to respect the emptiness of West Texas, how a storm could blow dust into your lungs and leave you praying it'd end before you ran out of water. But nothing in 20 years on these roads had prepared me for the silence under that silo. I parked the trailer where the gravel gave way to cracked pavement dotted with tufts of tumbleweed. The rusted sign beside the entrance read, Guadalupe, Silo, Est, 1923. Its letters half-eaten by time. I shoved down my last square of jerky and rattled the lock on the cab door until it clicked loose. The cab felt too bright, too familiar. I needed to walk, to feel that endless sky, to shake off the sense that the cargo behind me wasn't just lifeless kernels. The night breeze was cool but dusted my boots with a fine, flowery grit, as if the fields themselves were coughing up their harvest. I rounded the back of the trailer. The chute was closed tight, but through the slats I saw movement. My heart skipped. Grain shifts inside trailers all the time if something sloshes heavy. Your rig can jackknife without warning. But this looked different. The mass of milo rippled, bulging at odd angles, forming faint outlines like the suggestion of ribs or knees. I leaned closer, flashlight in hand, and caught sight of a shape pushing against the metal. Then another, and another dot. At first I thought my eyes were playing tricks, grain jagged and heaving under its own weight, maybe settling after the long drive. But then I heard it, the softest whisper, so low I almost imagined it, like a prayer scraping against my ear. Help, help me. I froze, hand pressed to the trailer's cold side. My flashlight trembled, beam jumping between golden grains and shadowed contours that didn't belong. Who's there? I called, voice rough as gravel. The wind swallowed my words, but the cry came again, sharper now. Help me. Please don't leave me. And for a heartbeat, I believed someone was buried alive inside my load, calling for rescue. I jerked my radio mic from its cradle and fingered the button. Unit 27. Come in dispatch. Are you reading me? Static. No response. I flipped through channels, but the desert held only silence. I circled to the other side of the trailer, heart hammering. My boots crunched over gravel as I reached the discharge gate's handle and hefted it. It rattled in protest. I slammed my shoulder into it. The hatch shuddered open. Grain poured out, a cascade of tiny stones, and as it spilled, I watched shapes form at the bottom of the pile, pale limbs, sunken faces, mouths agape in silent screams. I yelped and staggered back, raising my flashlight beam to find the source. Nothing but dust motes. The human forms were gone, the grain smooth and inert. Wiped sweat from my forehead even though the air was cold. My breath steamed in the beam. I thought I must be losing my mind. Drove too long, drank too little water, hallucinations under that bleak sky. I stepped back, intending to close the gate, when something grabbed my ankle. My heart lurched. I kicked out, but the grip was firm, fingers or something like fingers, curling around my boot. I yanked free and stumbled, eyes searching the darkness. Only grain behind me, only my trailer looming like a crooked promise. I climbed back into the cab, slamming the door until it rattled its seals. My radio crackled once, then went dead again. My cell phone showed no bars. I was cut off, stranded, at a rotting silo with a load that had turned alive. I revved the engine, but the truck shuddered and stalled. The dashboard clock glowed 8:03 p.m. My head pounded. The whisper followed me through the windows, faint but unmistakable. Please, don't. Leave? I snapped off the ignition and sat frozen, engine ticking as it cooled. I stared through the windshield at the silo's shadow, long and bent like a crooked finger pointing right at me. The truck's lamps cast a pale halo around me. The whisper came again, urging me out. My mind screamed, stay inside. But I couldn't. Something inside me, curiosity mixed with fear, drove me to the door. I twisted the handle and fell into the gravel, flashlight spinning from my grip. Behind me, the trailer door swayed open of its own accord, and grain tumbled out in a slow, deliberate flood. Each kernel that hit the ground seemed to pulse. The whisper swelled into a chorus. Help us, free us, save us. The voices were countless now, each one cold with desperation. I raised my flashlight and saw figures rising from the pile, ghostly shapes, bodies half-formed of Milo, their faces twisted in eternal anguish. They reached toward me with grainy hands, fingertips crumbling like ash. I backed away, tripping over a rock, coughing on dust. The figures knelt and began to chant in low, grinding voices. The ground beneath the pile shifted, and a single form pushed free. A woman in a faded dress, grain for skin, her mouth moving soundlessly before her skeleton voice rattled into my mind. Lend us your flesh. I screamed and scrambled for the cab, the figures trailing after me like a tide of nightmares. Slamming inside, I yanked the door closed and locked it. The whisper surged angry now, screaming at me in 1,000 overlapping tones. The headlights flickered, then died, plunging me into pitch darkness. I fumbled for my phone's flashlight, beam trembling as I raised it toward the windshield. Outside, the figures pressed close, hands flattening against the glass, eyes burning holes through the metal. Their mouths opened in silent wails, but their voices filled the cab, pressing into my skull. I shoved the rig out of gear and turned the key. Nothing. I tried again and again, until the starter gave a single pathetic click. Then silence. The whispers stopped. The figures recoiled as if struck, dissolving back into heaps of grain. The air cleared, the night returning to stillness, broken only by the rasp of wind against the broken windows. I sat panting, trembling, sweat cooling on my skin. I glanced at the clock. 8:07 p.m., 4 minutes of hell. My hand shook so badly I couldn't dial dispatch. I remembered the old lever under the seat, used for emergency brake release. If I pushed that and gave the rig a shove, maybe I could roll the trailer enough to jar the grain, break the cycle. I unlatched the brake and pushed with all my strength. The truck lurched forward over the gravel and into the lane. I hit the ignition one last time and the engine roared to life as if nothing had ever been wrong. I slammed it into gear and peeled out, dust billowing behind me. Over my shoulder I saw the silo shrinking in my mirror. The gravel lane swallowed by darkness. No ghostly shapes, no whispers. For a moment I thought it was over. Then my rear view lit up with movement. The grain in the trailer writhed, glowing faintly in the taillight glow, forming shapes that pressed against the canvas walls. A single figure pressed a palm against the metal, eyes glowing through the weave. Its mouth opened, and I heard it clear as a bell. We're still here. I stomped the accelerator, gears grinding, my rig bucking under the sudden surge. The voices rose in anguished screams that rattled my bones. I didn't look back again until the highway lights swallowed me, and even then I could still hear them. In my mind, help us, free us. The load settled behind me, silent and still, but I know what's in that grain. I know that somewhere out there, beneath the weight of those kernels, bodies are waiting, begging for release, screaming in silence, hungry for the flesh of the living. And the next time I stop by that old silo, they'll be waiting, ready to slip from their prison and reach for me. I'll never haul grain again without seeing those faces in the shadows, and I'll never forget their lament. I'd been hauling livestock from Amarillo to Beaumont for 10 years, but I'd never once seen a glitch like this. Mile marker 143 sat on the edge of nothing, just a skinny post sprouting from scorched blacktop where the panhandle handed off to East Texas. Every time my rig passed that post, my GPS would flicker, redraw the route, and point me onto a gravel turnoff that didn't exist on any map I'd ever used, state, county, hell, even the backroads atlas my grandfather left me. When I first saw the reroute, I chalked it up to a busted satellite or some glitch in the system. I whipped the wheel left onto fresh gravel, thinking I'd circle back in a minute, maybe meet a road crew at the turnaround. What I found was the same as always, a gravel patch in the scrub, bordered by mesquite and crushed granite, a single dead end where the GPS insisted I go. And each time, at the lip of that circle, there'd be someone standing in the dusk or dawn light thin as a scarecrow, dirty jeans and a long-sleeved flannel, thumb out and face hidden beneath a faded trucker cap. The first time I slammed on the brakes so hard I felt the cab lurch. Dust exploded off the trailer, and I caught my breath. The hitchhiker was too still, like a scarecrow come to life but with the posture of a man long broken. The cap shadowed whatever his eyes were doing. I waited for him to move, make some sign, but he just tilted his head as though listening to something on the wind. I peered at him, frozen, breath rattling against the glass. Then my GPS dinged. Proceed straight. I looked back at the router screen. The gravel circle had vanished. The road stretched on into the blacktop horizon. Blink, and the world snapped back. I was tearing away eastbound, heart jacked in my throat, and when I glanced in the mirror, the hitchhiker was gone. I tried to tell myself I was hallucinating. Long haul, late hours, too much coffee and diesel fumes. But it happened again 3 weeks later, same marker, same reroute, same gravel turnaround, same silent figure waiting. In the flat light. By then I knew his face, if face it was hidden in shadow. That time I gunned the accelerator, tore through the patch, sprayed gravel in a cloud. and heard a low sigh that rattled the cab like someone scratching on the roof. I flipped the interior light, saw no one. My rig roared back onto the highway without my steering, GPS silent but locked on. I couldn't shake the image. Nights, I'd lie in a sweat-soaked sleeper cab, pillow soaked through, listening to the wind whip down my vents and hearing footsteps, faint, on the sheet metal roof above me. I'd lock the doors, jam the wheel chock under the pedal, and sleep in fits, dreaming of a man who stood in a gravel circle, face blacker than a tar pit, waiting for his ride home. I started changing routes. Wouldn't go near marker 143. Took I-20 through Abilene, then cut south on 84. Longer, but safer. Then one morning at 3 a.m., I came around an S-curve in the dark, and the dash lit up, recalculating. I looked at the screen. Arrow pointed left, off the shiny interstate onto a service road I'd never used, leading me straight back toward that zone. The arrow froze, pulsed. My hands tightened on the wheel. I hesitated, listening to the radio hiss static, then compelling me. Turn left at next exit. I gritted my teeth. I took the exit. The service road was narrower than the interstate, cracked and overgrown. It spat me out onto gravel again, exactly at the spot with the marker. This time, the hitchhiker was stumbling forward, hand pressed to his temple as though in pain. I could see a flash of pale cheek and mottled hair, as if he'd spent weeks in the sun. His arm hung too long, fingers splayed like roots. I killed the engine and sat, radio clicking the way it always did before the world snapped. My knuckles were white. I watched him move toward me, dragging his feet. I could hear breathing, shallow, raspy, too loud to be my own. My heart hammered in my ears. I gulped in air that smelled of scrub and old blood. I flicked a switch and the cab lights glowed, bouncing off the windshield. When I looked again, his silhouette was rising, stretching taller, limbs elongating until the cab windows framed an impossibility. I yelled, backed up, wheels spinning gravel into a cloud that stung my eyes. The monster lurched into the dust, face splitting into a grin that reached from ear to ear, then vanished. I slammed the rig back onto the highway at 45, adrenaline numbing the tires, GPS silent. I gunned it until the sun fanned across the windshield. I stopped in a truck stop near Tyler and stared at myself in the rearview mirror. My skin was clammy, eyes red. I thought I might be losing my mind, but something in me clung to the chance that it was real, that I had proof. I lowered the shade, crawled into my sleeper, and tried to rest. When I woke, I found an envelope tucked under the cab door. I wasn't sure when it had appeared. It was brown paper, like a sandwich bag, sealed with red wax. Inside, a single photograph. Me from behind, standing at a gravel circle beside a mile marker. I recognized the jacket I'd worn the night before. The hitchhiker stood beside me, hand on my shoulder, its face a smear of black. I dropped the photo like it burned my palm. There was something scrawled on the back in shaky ink. See you soon. I threw the picture in the trash, but hours later, hauling feed to Lake Charles, I found it again on the passenger seat, dust clinging to the edges. This time, there was another message. Soon is closer than you think. I started calling dispatch, but they just heard static, GPS glitches, me swearing into the phone. They rerouted me around every cursed inch of that route, but every time I punched in my destination hometown on the Gulf side, the GPS recalculated through that gravel patch, insisted I go there, and told me the drive would be 30 minutes. Shorter if I just trusted it. Gradually, fighting it became exhausting. I'd spend hours skulking in loops, cowered circles on the asphalt. Finally, I gave in. I let the GPS lead. It jangled me awake at 2:37 a.m., cantoing take next left, and I steered onto the service road. Dust devils danced along the edges. I felt them whisper as I rolled to a stop. Do it. I killed the rig. I unbuckled, grabbed my flashlight, and opened the door. The night air was warm against my face, thick with cicada chatter. I stepped onto loose gravel, the beam cutting a cone of pale light. He was there, taller, slenderer than a man should be, standing on the far side of the turnout. He held something in his hands, something that glimmered when my light passed over it. Bones, bleached white like finger bones or a small vertebra. He raised it as if offering a gift. I felt in my gut it was mine. I swallowed. Who are you? He didn't answer, only tilted his head. I walked closer, flashlight trembling in my hand. The gravel crunched under boot, each step echoing. Then, as I neared, I saw it wasn't bones at all but my own teeth, clean and bright against the dark. My heart froze. I reached out, horror striking my throat. On the next exhale, I stumbled back, cracked ribs slapping the cab. I jerked around, yanked the door open, and lunged inside. The hitchhiker vanished. I slammed the door, fired the engine. The trailer jackknifed in the gravel. I straightened it with a roar and tore back onto the blacktop. The marker came into sight, green on white standing against the sky. Mile marker 143. My GPS chimed, then died, screen black. I drove past without a glance, sweat gathering in my armpits. The highway stretched out empty, the dawn-bleached horizon unbroken. I didn't stop until I saw the city lights bleeding through. Morning haze. I pulled into a parking lot, sat there until the sun was high, working up the nerve to look. There was no envelope on the seat, no photograph, no teeth, just my hands shaking on the wheel and the knowledge that somewhere behind me, in that gravel circle, my reflection stood waiting for the next drive home. The wind off the panhandle blew dust across the blacktop in lazy spirals as the sun slipped behind distant mesas, turning the sky a bruised purple. I sat behind the wheel of Old Betsy, my Freightliner nearly groaning under the weight of oversized machinery strapped to its flatbed, the convoy's lead rig. Behind me, the second truck and the escort vehicles followed in tight formation, their headlights cutting swaths of white through the gathering gloom. I'd been hauling this load from Amarillo all day, and I'd been itching to get off the road before night fell completely, but I'd vowed to keep pace until we hit Lubbock, where we'd switch drivers. My hands itched around the worn steering wheel, knuckles pale beneath the thin gloves. When I spotted it in the rearview mirror, the pilot car, an old Chevy Suburban with hazard lights blasting orange, was gone. 1 minute it was riding my tail, like a stubborn gnat, and the next, empty road stretched behind me. That should have been impossible. We'd built our whole schedule around that escort. No permit, no passage. I glanced at the mirror again, heart thudding. No Suburban, no flashing lights. I took a breath and checked my gauges. Betsy was purring along, diesel humming in the lines, everything normal. I slowed, letting the load momentum ease off, fearing I'd missed a turn or the pilot had pulled. Aside, the convoy dispatcher's voice crackled in my CB. Big Rig 1, roll call. Where's your pilot? No answer. The second truck responded, here. All green, but no escort chimed in. I tapped the mic, but static mocked me. Pilot. Car, you copy? Over. Nothing but crackle. I cursed, jacked the rig into neutral, and coasted to the shoulder where the shoulder barely existed. I parked, slammed the air brakes, and climbed down into the gravel, boots crunching. My headlamp cut through the gloom, picking out the skid marks and broken guardrail where we'd passed 10 miles back. I stepped onto the pavement and spun around, looking for the glow of a taillight anything. Nothing but a long ribbon of asphalt and weeds. The air had turned chill, and I tugged the collar of my jacket up against the breeze. My radio buzzed again, and I cleared my throat. "Pilot car, this is Rig 1. Where the hell are you?" Silence. Only my own breath exhaled in the dark. Frowning, I climbed back in and shut the door, the cab settling with a hiss. The second truck rolled up behind me, headlights bobbing. The driver, a kid named Ramirez, nodded through the windshield. I shook my head. "Escort's gone," I said. He squinted. "Maybe he pulled over?" I wrestled the mic free. "Dispatcher. Pilot car has disappeared. Recommend pulling to nearest turnout." The dispatcher sighed. "Copy. Nearest is 6 miles up. You two get there. Wait for instructions." I punched the throttle and eased back onto the highway, Ramirez close behind. Headlights off, that's standard until you reach the next exit. With lighting, so we rolled in darkness, save for Betsy's marker lamps. The air smelled of acacia and dust. We made the turnout, a small concrete slab flanked by mesquite. Beyond it, miles of empty highway stretched black into the night. Ramirez cut his lights, and I followed. Around us, crickets thrummed in the scrub grass. His window rattled when he rolled it down, and the hush behind it felt sudden, like stepping. Inside a coffin, I tapped my CB again. No pilot, no dispatcher. Only static. Ramirez pointed at the highway. "What's that up there?" I peered into the distance. A pair of lights, low and soft amber, flickered against the horizon. They weren't headlights, they were the pilot's beacons, wavering like will-o'-the-wisps. "Pilot's back." I muttered and reached for the mic. "Big Rig 1 to pilot." The lights blinked twice, then started moving toward us. Too slow for a vehicle, but too deliberate for standing lanterns. They bobbed along the asphalt, gliding closer. My stomach tightened as the lights took shape. 2 amber flashes, side by side like a grin creeping across the night. I killed Betsy's engine, and Ramirez did the same. Darkness pressed in. The lights crawled over the blacktop, coming closer, until I could make out the shape. The Chevy Suburban, its chrome grille gleaming despite the dark, hazard lights pulsing. But something was wrong. The windows were dead black, no reflections, no tint, as if the glass was a void. And behind the wheel sat no one. I blinked and the rig rolled past our turnout, silent except for the soft throb of those beacons. It passed howling, casting long orange shadows across the grass, then swung onto the shoulder ahead of us. Ramirez fumbled for his mic. "It's driverless," he whispered. "Dude, it's empty." I saw his breath fog the window, my heart hammering. I opened my door. "Let's go," I said, voice low. We leapt out, running toward the abandoned Suburban. Gravel sprayed beneath our boots. The hazard lights pulsed, calling us, daring us. I reached the back of the vehicle, hand trembling as I pressed against the tailgate. "Hello?" My voice was fragile. The lights flickered faster, strobed, and I jumped as one winked out and then back on. When I pulled my hand away, it left a smear of mud on the tailgate, and the echo of distant engine idling tickled in my ears. I spun around. Ramirez was gone. Ramirez? I yelled. The field was empty, except for the cheatgrass and cottonwood shadows. I sprinted back to where we'd parked Betsy, my boots thudding. Halfway there, the Suburban's lights exploded in a final strobe, as though the rig exhaled its dying breath. Then all at once they faded. Darkness reclaimed the highway. A horn blasted. I stumbled to a halt and whirled around. Betsy's headlights flooded the pavement. Ramirez rode shotgun, eyes wide. "What the hell?" he mouthed. I opened the door wordlessly and climbed in. He slammed the door as I gunned the engine. The air horn bellowed our official escort call, and in my mirror, just for a second, I saw the Suburban silhouette melting into the night. Like ink dissolving in water dot, we roared back onto the interstate, adrenaline lancing through my veins. Ramirez grabbed the CB. "Dispatcher, this is Rig 1. Pilot car is compromised." "Repeat, compromised." His voice cracked. The dispatcher answered immediately. "Copy that. Alternate escort en route. Hold position until it arrives." I exhaled, sweat purling on my forehead even though the AC was blasting. Ramirez turned. His head. In the mirror I saw the empty road stretching behind us, quiet, flat, endless. Minutes passed. My pulse calmed, but the flicker of amber in my mind wouldn't dim. Where had that thing come from? What had it wanted? My eyes pricked with cold fear when the new pilot car's headlights winked onto the shoulder, this time a white SUV. Hazard lights came on. Mechanical, reassuring. But I didn't relax. The desert had its ghosts, and I just chased one down the interstate. I shifted into gear, rolled forward. Ramirez put the new escort in place, and I fell in line behind it. The convoy snaked away into the dark, marker lights blinking. The highway was as empty as ever. And behind me, in the rearview mirror, I swore I saw an amber glow at the horizon's edge, watching us go. He eased his rig onto the deserted stretch of Highway 67 just past midnight, the hum of diesel beneath him like a heartbeat in the silence. The moon hung low and sickly over the prairie, pale light spilling across the cracked asphalt. He'd been hauling livestock from Amarillo to Laredo, tired as hell, but miles from the next rest stop. He clicked the CB mic loose from its cradle and keyed up. "Breaker 19, anybody out there?" Nothing but static flickered back, as if the radio itself were afraid to speak. The road stretched on, ribbon thin, flanked by mesquite and sage. The breeze rattled a loose bit of tarp on his trailer, tugging it like fingernails scraping concrete. He glanced in the mirror-empty fields and dark shapes beyond, but nothing alive. Something about the emptiness gnawed at him, a hollowness that promised more than loneliness. At mile marker 83, his headlights caught a lone figure. By the roadside, a woman in a flaxen dress, her hair hanging wet and tangled. He thought his eyes were playing tricks. There shouldn't be a soul out here. But she flagged him, trembling, a torch of desperation in her eyes. He yanked the wheel and drifted onto the shoulder, the rig's tires crunching gravel. He killed. The engine, silent, swallowed the cab. She climbed into the passenger seat without a word. The cab smelled of damp leather and rot, as though death itself had taken residence. He frowned. "You okay, ma'am? Where you headed?" She stared straight ahead, her knuckles white on her lap. Her gaze seemed fixed on something behind him in the glass. "I've lost my children," she whispered, voice thin as a breeze over tombstones. "They ran into the field." She closed her eyes, and when she opened them again, there was no light behind them, just darkness. He tried to comfort her, but the night pressed in. The gauges ticked down toward emptiness. His fuel light blinked. That was impossible. He'd filled up 2 hours ago. The RPMs dipped, then surged, and the engine stalled, cutting his headlights. They sat in pitch black, the only illumination the woman's pale face, shrouded in moonlight through the windshield. She reached out, fingers grazing his arm. Cold, he jerked free. In the mirror he saw dozens of shapes at the perimeter of his. Lights glints that could have been eyes. He switched on his dome light. They vanished. Only the woman remained, her expression shifting into something ancient and hungry. He fumbled for the CB, keying it again. "Mayday, mayday." Engine died. "Need help." His voice hitched. Static burst through, then a crackled voice. "You shouldn't have stopped." It was low, distant, metallic. "Keep going." The line went dead. His heart slammed. He tried the ignition again. Click. Nothing. With a resigned breath, He reached into the glove box for a flashlight. The beam cut through the cab, landing on the woman's lap. She held a child's doll, half its face missing, one eye a black crater. Beneath it, the tarp on the trailer outside shifted. As he shone the light past her, he saw the open gates of the trailer rattling. Then a shape emerged. It walked on. 2 legs, but not like any animal he'd ever known. Ribs curved like ceremonial arches, skin taut over bone. Its hollow eye sockets, rimmed in shadow, fixed on him. It stepped forward, silent as prayer. The door behind the truck clicked shut. On its own. He snapped off the dome light and fumbled for the door handle. The woman put a hand on the gear shift, gentle but unyielding. "They belong here now," she said, voice cold and final. "They belong to the fields." He yanked his arm away. She didn't struggle. Outside, the creature scraped its claws along the side of the trailer. It limped toward the cab door, head swaying, a grotesque parody of a child seeking comfort. He took a breath and flung the door open, stumbling into the gravel as the woman's scream tore the air, an echo of something human and something not. He sprinted to the guardrail, heart hammering so hard he feared it would tear itself free. The rig's taillights flickered on, briefly illuminating the road ahead. Without looking back, he dove onto the asphalt and began to run, boots skidding on loose rock. The night groaned behind him, the engine coughing, the doors banging, metallic laughter drifting through the dark. He didn't stop until the horizon burned pink with dawn. Only then did the radio crackle to life with the friendly drawl of another trucker. He lost consciousness, his last thought a desperate plea. "Don't stop, don't ever stop." When deputies finally found the rig, miles down the highway, it sat silent, windshield cracked, the passenger seat empty. Inside, the doll lay on the dashboard, its one glass eye reflecting the rising sun. And in the trailer, fields of skulls packed tight beneath the tarp, rattling softly in the morning breeze. The highway was empty when I pulled off at the last rest area, no lights, no open windows, just the low rumble of my diesel and the distant hum of cicadas. I'd been hauling refrigerated produce from Lubbock to Beaumont, a routine run I'd done so many times I could map it in my sleep. My rig's name was Bluebird, a beaten-up freightliner with more miles than stories, but she ran like a dream, and that night I was grateful for every inch of pavement between me and San Antonio. I parked in the shadow of the lone sodium lamp, the trailer's reefer unit clicking off as I killed the engine. The air smelled faintly of pickles and damp asphalt. I stretched my legs and walked around back, checking the doors and locking them before climbing up into the sleeper. I set the thermostat to 20 degrees to keep everything crisp. I'd barely closed my eyes when I felt the reefer kick back on its mechanical heartbeat, a familiar lullaby. I drifted off to sleep with a steady buzz. Hours later, I woke to a sharp hiss and the faint glow of moonlight filtering through the curtains. Something was wrong. The temperature gauge was climbing. I rubbed my eyes and glanced at the readout, 60 degrees. Frozen freight wasn't supposed to thaw on the shoulder of a deserted rest stop. I swung my legs out of the bunk, boots thudding on the cold metal floor, and grabbed my jacket. My flashlight bobbed in my hand as I padded to the back of the cab and yanked the curtain aside. The trailer door was cracked open. A sliver of pale moonlight spilled into the cavernous darkness. My heart picked up pace as I stepped down onto the catwalk. I wrestled the latch and forced the door wider. A gout of cold air washed over me, carrying with it the smell of frost and old leather. My breath fogged in front of me as I raised the flashlight beam into the trailer. Nothing moved among the pallets of frozen chickens and boxes of ice cream novelties. But on the inside of the door was a handprint, frosted, almost crystalline, like someone had pressed a bare hand against the cold steel. The fingers were too long, too narrow, and the palm too small to belong to me. I shone my light on it, watching, as tiny beads of condensation formed around the edges, then dripped down in slow, deliberate drops. I stepped inside, the metal floor groaning under my weight, and edged closer to examine the print. No tracks led back into the trailer, and the boxes around were stacked neat as if nothing had happened. Yet I felt a chill crawl up my spine that had nothing to do with the ambient temperature. I closed the door, but it swung back open on its own accord, the latch clicking undone. A whisper curled around me, so faint I almost thought I'd imagined it. I spun, flashlight slicing the darkness. Silence. I reached up and slammed the door, sliding the bar home. The reefer unit kicked, back on with a metallic clatter. The gauge dropped back toward 20 degrees, and the interior lights flickered, then steadied. I backed away, heart slamming against my ribs. Something was in there. I could feel it. The hairs on my arms prickled. I stumbled back to the cab and climbed inside, slamming the bunk door behind me. I pressed my hands to either side of my head, trying to slow my breathing. When I dared peek through the small window, all was still. No movement, no shape, just the faint mist hanging in the trailer, like a frozen breath suspended in time. I told myself to sleep, that it was just a malfunction or my mind playing tricks. I sat there, staring at the curtains until the sun began to bleed into the sky, turning the darkness to pale blue. Eventually, exhaustion claimed me, and I fell into a half-dream where frost formed on my eyelids and something tapped at the glass. I jerked awake at first light, drenched in sweat despite the sub-freezing air. I threw on my jacket again and marched outside, determined to inspect the door. The trailer was quiet, innocuous, but on the ground lay a single faint footprint, a depress, in the gravel that glistened as the morning dew froze around it. It was too small for a boot, too delicate for any wildlife. It looked like a child's shoe print, but in its center was a small, round indentation, like someone had pressed a marble into wet cement. I came around back and saw the frost handprint. Still there, sharp as a snowflake. It was growing. Branching veins spread across the metal, ice crystals fracturing outward like spiderwebs. My breath caught. I grabbed my phone and flicked on the flashlight, but the beam died instantly, the screen going black. Panic rose in my throat. I yanked it back out, but it refused to power on. My radio was dead to no dial tone, no crackle. Of static dot the sky brightened above the treetops, the morning chorus of birds rising, and then I saw her, a shape shifting in the trailer's mist. I'd almost convinced myself it was my reflection or a trick of the light, but there was no glass. The form was small, hunched over, with shadows pooling beneath. I could just make out the outline of a head turned toward me, and a flicker of movement. I crept forward, boots crunching on the frost-hardened ground. The trailer door stood slightly ajar again, the latch undone. Adrenaline spiked through my veins. I reached for the latch, hand trembling. Before I could touch it, something scraped from inside, a slow, deliberate scratch that echoed in the face. Cold air. My flashlight flickered back to life, beam resting on the floor of the trailer, and I saw it. A small girl, half 50 and half flesh, skin mottled white as frost, hair dark and hanging in wet strands. Her eyes were completely black, rimmed in ice. She raised one thin arm, frost coating every inch, and pointed at me. Her lips parted in a silent plea. Behind her, the frost web had spread across the trailer walls, encasing boxes in a crystalline prison. The temperature plunged again. My breath gushed out in thick plumes. I pulled my jacket tight and backed away. She stepped forward, toes scraping the metal, leaving icy footprints behind. I stumbled down the catwalk, my boots skidding. The girls. Handprint on the door glowed faintly as if beckoning. I slammed the curtain shut, heart pounding so loud I thought it might burst. The door thudded against the frame. I heard the latch click, though I hadn't moved. I ran for the cab, jumped in, and fired the engine. The reefer unit coughed, then died. The gauge climbed again. I hit the brakes in reverse, fishtailed, then pushed forward and tore away down. The highway, tires squealing. My high beams cut through the morning haze. I glanced in the mirror. The trailer door stood wide open, mist seeping out like cold smoke. I drove until my hands cramped, until the sun was high and the road uncurled before me like a ribbon of salvation. At the next way station, I pulled. In and shut everything off, adrenaline still buzzing in my veins. A mechanic climbed under the trailer. He emerged shaking his head. "Reefers seized up solid," he said. Ice formed in the cooling lines. Must have been some sub-zero blast. I nodded, voice caught in my throat. He lifted the latch and tried the door. It wouldn't budge. He grunted and kicked at it, frost cracking. Finally, it swung open, and his flashlight revealed the frost web covering every surface, thick and impossible. He backed away, eyes wide. "What the hell?" I didn't answer. I climbed back in the cab, locked the door, and drove on, leaving the cold behind. But I knew it rode with me, nestled in the belly of that trailer, waiting for the next stop, the next driver. Every time. I passed a rest area. I felt it not in the rumble of the reefer, but in the pull of the frost, whispering my name, begging to be let out. And I knew I'd never be rid of her handprint or her eyes, frozen forever in the condensation of that night. It started just before dawn, the sky a bruise of violet and orange over Nueces Bay as I pulled my rig onto the narrow service road that cut across those shallow waters. I'd heard the story's old concrete slabs just beneath the murky surface. Remnants of a causeway locals said was washed out back in the 70s when a storm surge tore through this stretch, but I needed a shortcut, and Google Maps swore this route would shave 30 minutes off the haul to Corpus Christi. I eased the throttle, the engine low and steady, the smell of diesel mingling with the salt wind that seeped through every crack in my cab. It felt wrong almost immediately, the way the steering wheel tugged to the right, as if the rig itself hesitated at the edge of something unseen. Water lapped at the tires, cold and opaque, hiding whatever lay beneath, and I pressed on. The headlights cutting cones of yellow through the gloom dot, then came the snag, a sudden wrench that caught me. Like a fish on a line, the rear axle shuddering as the trailer snapped to a halt. I slammed the brakes, the cab tilting forward, and climbed out as the engine idled, each breath coming in frosty puffs. I grabbed a flashlight, the beam bouncing over shallow ripples toward the murky depths, where my rig's rear wheels rested on what looked like broken slabs of pavement. I circled behind, heart hammering, the cold mud sucking at my boots. I shone the light on the half-buried concrete, running my gloved hand across its algae-slick surface, feeling the grooves of rebar beneath. A storm drain gurgled somewhere off, to my left, and I leaned closer, ears straining against the silence, until a faint sound slipped into my consciousness. Long, slow, deliberate creaks like old bones shifting under pressure. I paused, breath catching, listening. The headlights illuminated a patch of water, and a ripple ran against the steel frame, so slight I almost missed it. Then something moved beneath. A tendril-like limb of black, muddy water unfurled along the edge of the trailer, thin as a snake's tail, and I froze, every instinct yelling to get back in the cab. But curiosity's stupid, fatal curiosity kept me anchored to the spot. The tendril scraped against the metal, tiny bubbles rising to the surface. I shined the beam down and saw it, a pale hand, slender but wrong, its fingers too long, bending at angles no human joint should. The skin was gray-green, mottled with mud and silt, and the fingernails were ragged, cracked as bone. My stomach clenched, bile rising, and I stumbled back, the flashlight swinging wildly, but the beam stayed trained on that hand as it inched upward. Reaching, seeking purchase on the trailer's flanged edge, I gripped the flashlight like a weapon, backing away until my boots sank knee-deep into the sludge. The hand paused, its wrist disappearing back beneath the black water. Then another appendage surfaced a forearm, slim and smooth, veins standing out in lines darker than shadow. My heart plugged my ears, adrenaline rolling through me in waves. I wanted to cry out, to tear back to the cab and floor it, but my feet felt rooted in the muck. And then the outlines of a head rose, half submerged, hair stringing about it in the water like algae. The face was sunken hollow cheeks, eyes sealed shut by crusted skin, lips drawn back in a silent scream. And in that moment, the thing opened. Its eyes, two black pits where light went to die, saw it for what it was, then a drowned something dragging itself from the bay, from whatever watery grave lay beneath those ruined slabs. I yanked my flashlight arm back, all focus on escape, but something possessed me, a savage curiosity that demanded I watch. The thing pulled itself up, elbows digging into the concrete, its body emerging joint by joint, ribs bending around broken. Vertebrae, pelvis shifting like cracked machinery, limbs bent grotesquely. When it stood, half on the slab, half in the bay, water poured from its joints, pooling on the pavement. It was less human than a thing shaped like a man, waterlogged and bloated, eyes gleaming with something feral, as though it had waited decades. For a target, it lurched forward, and the sound came then, a wet ripping, like fabric tearing, a sound that lodged in my brain and refused to leave. My mind screamed run, but my legs gave out, sinking further into the mud as I scrambled backward. The creature's mouth opened in a toothless grin, a hole in the center of its face where a nose should be, and it reached out with one long, thin arm. I saw the rebar at its elbow, rusted and jagged, jutting from its skin. It tapped the trailer frame with a finger, a quiet accusation. I screamed and turned, ripping off my coat, and lunged for the cab door, but as I did I felt a tug at. My boot, another hand, colder than ice, clamped around my ankle. I jerked free, stumbling forward, chest pounding so hard I thought it might burst. The creature let out a soft, gurgling laugh, a noise that seemed to echo in my skull, and I saw dozens of figures in the water behind it, shapes pressing against each other, reaching up through gaps in the slabs, their mouths open in endless, silent screams. I climbed into the cab, slamming the door, flipping the lock, and turned the ignition key. The engine coughed, then roared to life, lights flaring as my heart slammed in time with the pistons. I threw it into gear and roared off that submerged road, tires churning water and mud, spray shooting out behind me like the wake of a boat. But even as I accelerated, the sluggish road held me, each slab dragging against the wheels, slowing me, and I heard it, the scraping of concrete, the wet thud of something hitting the chassis. I wrenched the wheel, swerving onto firmer ground, but the trailer jackknifed, fishtailing towards the bay. And there, in my side mirror, I saw the thing standing on the last slab, waving as though bidding me a fond farewell. Its hollow eyes glowed, and the hand that had torn at my boot pointed straight at me as if marking me. Behind me, on the narrow road, I thought I saw hundreds more emerging from the dark water. I stomped the accelerator, the rig shuddering, the engine straining like a beast about to burst its cage, and finally the concrete ends and asphalt begins, smoother ground that felt like salvation beneath the tires. I didn't look back again as I sped toward the highway, the morning sun breaking over the horizon, painting the bay in blood-red light. But I know they're there, on those sunken slabs, waiting, a drowned legion of the dead, hungering for living flesh. And sometimes, late at night, when the moon is low, I hear the soft scrape of concrete on steel, as though someone is tracing my rig's path, following me, tugging, waiting for the day the shortcut claims another soul. Fog clung to the cracked asphalt like damp wool as I rolled in under a half-dead sodium lamp that flickered and buzzed like a trapped insect. The way station sat to my right, a squat concrete shack with peeling paint and ribbed metal overhang, its scale platform yawning empty and silent. I'd driven past this place dozens of times, but tonight something felt off, like the road had exhaled and pulled me in, desperate to be heard. I eased my rig forward until the front wheels crunched onto the plate. The gate overhead groaned, shut behind me, and the lamp's hum stilled to a tense quiet. I glanced at the scales indicator long ago someone had spray painted, its numbers red so they looked like bleeding wounds. The dial flicked past my gross weight, 1 click, 2, then ignored its own limits, spinning backward as if tearing at its rusty gears. The lights on the gauge went dark. My heart stuttered and I reached out to the panel on the side of the shack. Normally, you asked to pull in, then waited for the attendant's nod. But tonight, the call button emitted only a dull thump under my finger, like a muted heartbeat. I sat frozen, engine idling, sweat beating at my temples, and then the loudspeaker above the window crackled to life. It spat static, then a voice so faint I thought I was imagining it. Move on. Move on. The tone was pleading, urgent. I flicked the switch and pressed my ear to the grill. There was no attendant inside, no flicker of movement as I peered through. The dusty window. The shack's single bulb glowed weakly, but the room beyond was empty. No clipboard, no coffee mug, no scatter of papers. Just a low hum of old wiring. Another burst of static, then the voice again, softer this time. Move on. Move on. It tugged at the corners of my mind, like cold fingers tracing my spine. I wrenched myself out of the cab, boots crunching on salt-stained concrete. The night air was sharp cold enough to make my breath cloud. I stepped around the cab and stared at the shack's door. It was slightly ajar. My gut coiled. I should have turned and driven away, headed back to the highway and the safety of headlights. But some dark curiosity held me fast. Slowly, I pushed the door open. Inside, the room was empty but for a swiveling chair that faced the speaker window and an ancient clipboard nailed to the wall. I crossed the threshold and the door slammed behind me with a crack like a rifle shot. The chair spun toward me on its own, its cracked vinyl seat twisted at an odd angle. My breath hitched, and the dial on my gauge outside clicked again. Click. Click, click, as if measuring my hesitation. On the clipboard hung an inspection sheet, yellowed and brittle. The last entry was dated 10 years ago. Below, someone had scrawled in spidery letters, "Exceeded capacity, unbalanced load." Beneath that, another note, more recent but smudged. Driver noted strange whispers, chalked it up to wind. And at the bottom, a single line, neat and fresh. "Do not leave." I froze. The pen had fallen from the clip. It lay on the counter, tip uncapped, blue ink dried into a mottled pool. I swallowed. If I left the pen where I'd found it, would the note disappear? Would the shack close itself up like a wound? My fingers hovered, but the whisper came again, clearer this time. Move on. Move on. I snapped my head toward the window. Outside, the rig's headlights strained at the fog, the scale plate beneath it gleaming like a pallid grave marker. The dial had stopped spinning. It pointed to an impossible number. My blood felt like ice as the door behind me creaked. I spun, back just in time to see the chair roll 3 inches across the floor, scraping against the linoleum. Then it stopped. Silence filled the room, thick as sludge. I heard my own heartbeat thud in my ears, loud enough to drown everything, until another whisper crept through the speaker, "Stay." The word hovered between spots of static and I froze, breathing shallow. The whisper was too low to belong. to any human being more like the sigh of old machinery trying to speak after decades of neglect. I turned back to the chair. Nothing should be moving, but the floorboards groaned beneath invisible weight. My skin brimmed with goose flesh. Sweat ran down my back in icy rivulets. I told myself it was just my mind playing tricks. Driving alone on a foggy night will do that, yet instinct screamed to run. I stepped toward the door, reached for the handle, and felt a sudden rush of wind as it swung open. White fog rolled in like a tide, billowing across the floor, curling around my ankles. I staggered back, heart pounding, as cold as the grave. The clip on the wall rattled, and the inspection sheet twisted in the breeze. The fresh note, "Do not leave," glowed for a moment in the dull light, then tore free and floated downward. It landed at my feet. I looked down. The ink had changed. Now it read, in elegant, looping script, "You're already gone." Panic recoiled through me. I dove toward the chair, grabbing its arms, and yanked. It creaked and lurched forward, but didn't release. The fog snaked around my legs, cold and wet, and I heard the whispers again, not through the speaker, but all around, resonating in the walls, in the floor, in my skull. They formed words I couldn't quite catch, a distorted choir urging me into darkness. My lamp flickered and died, plunging the shack into near black. The only light came from a faint red glow behind the speaker grill. I lunged for the window and slammed my fist against the metal. It rang hollow, as if behind it was empty space. Then the red glow flared and the whispers surged into a deafening roar. I covered my ears and stumbled backward against the wall. My boot slipped on the note, and I fell. My head struck something. Hard the edge of the counter, then all went black. When I came to, I was sitting in my cab, engine running, fog sweeping past my windshield like vapor from some ancient ghost. My door hung open. I could see the shack's roof beyond the lamp. It stood silent once more, lifeless and waiting. I stared at my rearview mirror. My face was pale as chalk, and in my eyes I saw the reflection of that red glow pulsating softly. The scales dial lay still. I shifted into drive, but my rig didn't move. I glanced at the indicator. It read exactly 0. Gross weight, net weight, everything at nothing. My rig had become weightless, as if severed from the earth. Behind me, the shack's loudspeaker crackled to life one last time. I rolled down. My window and the sound washed in. A single word, drawn out almost affectionately, yet filled with menace. Welcome. The engine rumbled, then stalled. I turned the key. Nothing. The fog pressed in so close I could taste it. I unhooked the air. Brake, set the truck in neutral, and pushed. At first nothing budged, then the rig lurched forward of its own accord, gliding across the plate as if it knew exactly where to go. I grabbed the wheel and braced myself. The gate above me squealed open, and I rolled out onto the highway, but the cab felt hollow, as if my rig had shed its substance inside that station. The way station receded behind, its lamp extinguishing in the gloom, and when I looked for it again, it was gone, swallowed by the fog. I drove until dawn, my rig refusing to carry any freight, the engine whispering in failed sputters. World opened into highway and sky, but I felt as empty as the scale I'd left behind. And sometimes, when the night wind blows just right, I swear I hear faint whispers through the vents of my cab, reminding me that some places keep their weight in something deeper than steel, and once they mark you as light enough to pass, they never let you go. The wind came first, a low, keening whistle that rattled the cab's windows and pressed cold fingerprints against my neck. I had been hauling a load of refrigerated produce up toward Amarillo, a route I'd run dozens of times in every kind of weather the panhandle could throw at me: blistering heat waves in July, dust storms in April, but never real winter. Not like this. Not Texas cold that fell without warning, wrapping the asphalt in a slick blanket so thin you couldn't see it until you were already sliding. I felt the first slide just south of Panhandle, where the red dirt meets blacktop and gives no quarter. To a rig weighing 30,000 pounds. One moment the wheels held firm. The next, the trailer fishtailed, its back end yawning to one side like a whale's tail slapping the water. I yanked the wheel gently, heart slamming, praying for traction. The rig obligingly straightened as if shaken awake, and I coaxed the throttle forward, keeping speed below what any sane man would call safe. The highway stretched ahead in mottled gray ribbons, the sun gone miles back, clouds low and bruised, no moon, no stars. Just that half-light darkness that made the world feel like a dimly lit dream. A mile later, it happened again. The front tires found purchase, then gone. The tractor spun toward the center line, and I gripped the steering wheel like a lifeline, chest tight, breath white in the frigid air. The rig swung free, careening across both lanes, and I stomped the brakes. Nothing. The truck slid sideways, its headlights illuminating an outline in the asphalt, a jagged crack stretching toward the horizon, splitting the blacktop like a fault line in the earth's skin. My heart froze as we hovered for a second. The entire rig balanced on the edge of that jagged wound. Then gravity won. The tractor plunged forward, nosediving into darkness. I shouted, a raw sound that cracked against the cab walls and clutched the wheel until my knuckles bled. The trailer lurched, jackknifing as its tandem wheels left the road. For a heartbeat, everything stopped. The roaring wind, the grind of metal, the pounding of my heart. Silence swallowed us whole. I don't know what made me crawl forward into the darkness, but I found the door handle and yanked it open. The cold hit me like a fist so cold it hurt, and I stumbled onto the asphalt, kneeling at the edge of that gaping crevice. Headlamps danced across its mouth, revealing nothing but utter blackness. No bottom, no sides. Just darkness that seemed to breathe and pulse, as if waiting for me to come closer. The air smelled different down there, not like diesel or frost, but damp and ancient, like the air in a cave that's been sealed for centuries. My breath rattled in my chest. I reached out with my flashlight, just a cheap mag light, and shone it into the void. The beam vanished within a few feet, as though swallowed by thick fog. Then I realized it wasn't fog. It was solid darkness, denser than any night I'd ever known, pressing against the edges of my light until it fizzled out and left only me and that gash in the earth. I backed away, heart hammering. The rig's engine idled somewhere behind me, lights flickering. I should have gotten back in, pushed on, called it a bad dream. But something drew me nearer. A whisper of movement, or maybe a sound, a low, rumbling murmur, like voices talking. Underwater. I knelt at the edge again, peering into the void, trying to make sense of it. The blackness seemed to pulse, as if alive, and I wondered briefly if I was drunk, hallucinating. I'm not a religious man, but I prayed then, asking for strength, asking for the damn thing to go away. The earth trembled beneath me. A low thud, like a heartbeat too slow for a human's, reverberated up my boots. I glanced over my shoulder at the rig. The trailer doors were snapping open, one swinging on its hinges. The produce inside crates of oranges and lettuce slid out, rolling toward the fissure. I shouted, turned, and raced back to the cab to kill the engine, slam it into park. My boots slipped on the ice and I nearly fell, catching myself on the doorframe. The cab door slammed shut behind me with a sickening clang. Pressed my back against the seat and stared out through the windshield, watching as the crates tumbled into the crack and vanished. I felt myself trembling uncontrollably. The CB radio crackled to life, static hissing, then a voice so faint I thought it might be my imagination. Keep on, keep moving. No call sign, no handle, nothing but a whisper on the air. I cleared my throat. "Who's that?" My voice sounded. Small, pathetic, static. Then the voice again. "Don't stop. Don't." The last word was swallowed by static. Something inside me snapped. I picked up the microphone and keyed it. "Breaker. Breaker. Anyone out there?" Silence. I waited, hoping someone else was out here, maybe another trucker who'd seen the same thing I had, but the highway was deserted. Just me, the rig, and that damned crack. I killed the ignition, took a deep breath. My breath fogged the glass. I rubbed my palms against my jeans, trying to warm them. The frozen sweat stung as it rubbed off. I told myself one more look, then I'd get going. I opened the door again and stepped out, the cold wind instantly numbing my cheeks. I crouched at the edge once more. The void seemed calmer now, like a wounded animal waiting for me to draw closer. The orange crates lay at the lip of the crack, their contents trampled and bruised. I knelt, reached out to grab one, and my fingers brushed the slick rind of an orange. The murmur came again, louder. "Join. U.S." It sounded like dozens of voices, overlapping, chanting in a slow rhythm. I recoiled, stumbling back, and the beam of my flashlight spun across the asphalt. I saw footprints my own leading to the edge, but beyond them, other prints, smaller, human-sized but too close together, circling the fissure. I froze, stomach twisting. There was no one there. I strained to see into the darkness, but the void held all light, all hope. Then the ground under my knee crumbled. A piece of the edge gave way, sending me lunging forward. I caught myself with an arm on the rough pavement, glancing into the crack as I did. Deep down, I saw movement of form, pale and thin, drifting upward like smoke. It had no features I could make out, just a silhouette of a person rising, arms outstretched as though greeting me. I crawled backward, panic flooding my veins. I stood, fumbling for the door handle, but the rig was farther away than I remembered. The wind whipped around me, and I thought I heard a hiss, like ice cracking under pressure. Sunken voices rose around me, chanting, beckoning. My head spun. I staggered toward the cab, heart pounding so hard I thought it would burst out of my chest. My fingertips brushed the door and I flung myself inside. Inside the cab, the heater roared to life with a sputter, sending a blast of cold air that smelled of burning dust. I slammed the door, locked it, dropped into the seat. My chest heaved, tears freezing on my cheeks. I stared through the windshield at the fissure, but now it looked smaller, almost natural, like a seam in the road. I picked up the CB mic again, hands shaking. "This is Redbird 2-4. Do I have a copy?" Over. Silence. The static hissed. Then faintly a reply, "Redbird, get out, before." Static swallowed the rest. I tossed the mic aside, started the engine, and slammed it into drive. The rig lurched, tires spinning for grip on the ice. White steam billowed from the stacks. I punched the accelerator, praying there was enough traction. The wheels caught, and we surged forward, the crack receding in my mirrors. I kept going. Tires humming, the heater sputtering warmth over my shaking limbs. Behind me, I thought I saw shapes rising from the fissure-thin figures drifting up like ghosts, their faces turned toward me. But when I blinked, they were gone. The highway stretched on, silent and empty. My vision blurred, adrenaline draining, leaving a hollow ache in my chest. I didn't stop until a blinking yellow sign announced the outskirts of Amarillo, bright. Lights spilled against the snow-covered plains. I eased off the throttle, letting the rig coast onto an exit ramp marked truck stop. The neon buzzed, hot and inviting. I parked under a flickering lamp, cut the engine, and sat for a long time. Inside. My sweatshirt, I felt my phone vibrating. I looked down. One missed call from dispatch. My finger hovered over the answer button. I knew what I'd say. Hey, yeah, I'm going to need you to send someone out. Highway's busted open up here on 287, just past Panhandle. Something's wrong. I shut my eyes. Outside, the wind howled, skating sheets of ice across the parking lot. And in my mind, I could still hear the whisper of the void trailing after me. Don't stop, don't stop, don't. You hit the highway just as the sun dips below the horizon, the sky bleeding orange into the flat expanse of West Texas. Your rig's engine hums like a low beast beneath you. The trailer behind you sealed shut, its placards warning of carcinogens. Too toxic to name. The air smells of diesel and heat rising off the asphalt. You've run this route 100 times, Amarillo to Midland, hauling who knows what for who knows who, but tonight feels different, like the road itself is holding. Its breath dot at first, it's merely a speck of smoke drifting from behind the sealed doors. You glance in the side mirror, expecting a mechanical failure or a tire gone up in flames, but there's no fire. The smoke is thick and pitch black, curling out in ghostly tendrils as if the trailer is breathing. You flick on your amber lights and pull off at the next turnout, heart already pounding. The asphalt here is cracked, dotted with tufts of scrub grass. You set the brakes, kill the engine, and ease yourself up the steps into the cold vault of the trailer's interior. Inside, the metal walls are lined with straps and hazard placards, but the place should be empty. You carried the drum of chemicals on a pallet secured to the floor. You shine your flashlight along the pallet, but the drum is gone. In its place is a dank black pool, the smoke rising from it in curling fingers. It swirls into shapes that cling to the walls, silhouettes of people, dozens of them, pressed flat like spirits trapped in glass. They have no features, just hollow outlines, limbs elongated and twisted, as if their bodies were stretched by some unseen force. You swallow. Your flashlight trembles as you shine it on one figure, and it tilts its head as if acknowledging your gaze. A soft, low sound drifts out, a chorus of hushed voices just below hearing. You strain to catch words, but it's unintelligible, like memories half remembered. Your pulse hammers in your temples. You back out of the trailer, slamming. The door behind you, and your flashlight beam dances across the black smoke escaping through the seams. It pools under the trailer, then slithers back into the cracks in the pavement. You slam the cab door, fumbling for the ignition key. The engine turns over, but the cab is chilly despite the desert night. The dash flickers. Your phones have no signal out here, and the CB squawks static. You tell yourself you're imagining things, heat mirages, the tension of hauling a load that could kill you with a single breath. But as you pull back onto the highway, the black smoke seeps from the trailer vents, and in your mirror you see a silhouette stepping onto the shoulder, a long-limbed shape, its arms hanging too low, its head inclined at an impossible angle. It glides closer each time you blink, a dark specter moving without footfall, its outline shimmering. You hammer the accelerator, sending dust up the road. The engine roars. The echoing void of the smokestack spits out more shapes, children. A woman cradling something small. A man with arms raised as though pleading. The highway stretches ahead, straight and unending, dotted by flickering reflectors. Your heart slams as you notice the shapes have multiplied. One hops onto the yellow line and balances there, its features blurred in the smoke. Another crosses the ditch at the side, stepping over the guardrail as if it doesn't exist. You try to shake them, slam your brakes, swerve, but they keep pace, gliding across the desert like drowned souls risen from a contaminated well. In your peripheral vision, they stalk your rig with slow deliberation, corners of trailers curling in on themselves to reveal more of their ranks. You drop to 40 miles an hour. then to 30, glancing for an exit, a town, anything. The nearest services were miles back. You can't turn off the road. The asphalt is too wide, the light's too far. You grip the wheel, knuckles white. A guttural whisper seeps through your vents as if the trailer is talking to you directly. Stop, 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 it says in a multi-voiced chorus. You slam the radio off. Silence, then the whisper again, more insistent, more urgent. Stop. Stop? Your mind flickers back to the drum you loaded earlier, a drum you never signed for. From a plant you never visited, with labels you didn't read. You had just been paid, told not to ask questions. Now you feel the price of silence in the stagnant night air. You push past 60, past 70, trying to build enough distance to lose them, but behind you, the silhouettes gather on the highway. Like a funeral procession. They stand beyond the beams of your headlights, a row of formless black figures, and one steps into the light, its edges jagged, as if carved from broken glass. It raises a hand, pointing at you accusing. The next. One slinks forward and reaches toward your tailgate, smoke dripping from its fingertips. You slam your foot down, the tires shriek, and at that moment the trailer shudders violently, as if the spirits inside are thrashing against the metal. The rig pitches, the trailer jackknifes, and you fight the wheel to keep it straight. But as you do, the shapes erupt from the back doors like a flock of ravens. They cling to the trailer's sides, pouring out in a tidal wave of black smoke. Their faces momentarily clear, eyes hollow, mouths hanging open in silent screams. They latch onto the rig, and the cab fills with the stench of burnt rubber and something damp and metallic, like coppery blood. You choke on the smell. Fingers of smoke snake through the vents, curling around your ankles, climbing up the steering column. Your vision narrows. You wrench at the wheel, and the rig swerves into the median, grinding through gravel. The shapes swarm around you, pressing against the windshield, their outlines throbbing against the glass. You hammer the horn, your breath ragged. You see your own reflection in the rearview mirror, eyes wide with terror, ears ringing with an otherworldly wail that shakes the bones of the truck. A handless figure presses its palm flat against the glass between you and them, and the glass cracks under the pressure, then silence. The horn falls quiet. The engine stalls. You slide to a stop, and the shapes are gone. The trailer sits behind you, still as stone, no smoke, no silhouettes. Your pulse pounds in the void. You sit, trembling, staring at the empty stretch of asphalt. Then you realize the placards on the trailer are gone, the license plate missing, the doors sealed as if they'd never been opened. You fumble for your phone, still dead. You climb down from the cab, knees wobbling. You circle the trailer, flashlight in hand, expecting to find evidence of the horror drums, stains, smears, but there's nothing. Only the endless road and the night. You shine your light under the wheels. There, etched into the pavement, in black soot, is a single word. Hitched. Your chest tightens. You look back in the direction you came, and in the distance, a figure stands by the guardrail, its head tilted in that same unnatural angle. It raises a hand, beckoning, and the night answers with a whisper, "Join us." You slam the trailer door, bolt it, and climb back into the cab. You start the engine, put the transmission in drive, and floor it, wheels churning gravel. The radio crackles to life with static, then a single voice. "Hitch a ride?" And it's your voice coming through the speaker, faint and echoing. You drive on, tears tight on your cheeks, the black silhouettes dancing in your mirrors, their outlines flickering as though alive. And as the miles pass under the rig, you feel the trailer grow heavier, as if the shadows inside have settled, waiting. Waiting for you to stop. Waiting for you to join them. The night air clung to my skin, thick with the memory of rain that had fallen hours before, leaving the asphalt glistening like spilled oil under my headlights. I'd been hauling a load of pecans from Fort Stockton, hugging the narrow ribbon of Highway 118 as it wound up into the Davis Mountains. Mile after mile of switchbacks carved through junipers and cedar elms, the curve so tight I had to shift down through 3 gears just to keep the rig from fishtailing. Somewhere back in the gloom, a low moon tried to peek through ragged clouds, but the glassy road swallowed its light whole. I saw them first in the rearview mirror. A pair of pinpricks, 2 headlights hovering behind me, unblinking. At first, I thought it was another rig, one of the local boys killing time on the road. But no, the lights stayed too close, too measured. On a mountain road, you never tailgate someone hauling a heavy load. You're either too cautious to close in or too impatient and overtake. But this sedan, it clung to my tail like a barnacle. The shape of the car never resolved something dark and low-slung. Its lines too smooth, too purposeful. I eased off the throttle, my foot brushing the clutch as I downshifted again. The engine's roar dropped to a dull growl, and I looked over my shoulder. No blink, no dimming. Just that pair of eyes following me through the curves. The road swept left, then right, then left again, each turn tighter than the last. The guardrails gleamed like silver teeth in my mirror, but the dark sedan never slowed. I tapped the brakes, the trailer's mass pushing me forward against the road, but the headlights wavered exactly in time with my speed dot. My heart thumped so hard I thought the rig's entire frame would shake. I swallowed and leaned forward, my hands gripping the wheel. The cab's cab-over headlights carved out the next bend, the yellow glow pooling into the abyss below. Somewhere up ahead, a fallen boulder lay half in the road, a hazard I'd nearly missed, and I drifted wide to avoid it. My trailer scraped over loose gravel, a shower of stones pinging the undercarriage. In the mirror, the sedan adjusted, drifting left to avoid the same obstacle. As if guided by my every move, I hit the radio button to share on Channel 19. Fort Davis to all. Anybody got eyes on a dark sedan behind a big rig? Headlights never? Blinks, Static answered, then a voice with a drawl. Ain't nothing but a late model commie black, probably lost. Tell him to turn around. I dropped the mic, lost my ass. Lost cars don't follow you switchback for switchback. I tapped the CB again, but the mic crackled and died. Only the hiss of static remained. I glanced at the dash fuels halfway, brakes okay, engine temp steady, and tried to calm my breathing. The Davis Mountains weren't known for ghost stories. That was more Big Ben's territory. But mountain roads had legends of their own of phantom lights, of drivers reappearing miles from where they'd vanished. Ahead, the road narrowed between rock walls that rose like cathedral buttresses. The trailer squeezed through, its wheels brushing the curves. I felt the rig shudder. The headlights in my mirror flickered just for an instant and then glowed again, as steady as a heartbeat. I blinked. The car looked closer. Too close. I could almost see its outline now. Sleek, low, its body absorbing light. The passenger window was blacked out. But in the driver's seat, I thought I saw a shape tall, lean, unmoving. No hands on the wheel. And yet it drove. I gripped the wheel with both hands, knuckles white. My pulse pounded in my ears. I could taste the acrid tang of sweat. All I wanted was to reach the summit, to get to the radio tower station at the top. They had a 2-way repeater up there, guaranteed signal. Once I hit that, I could call dispatch, highway patrol, whoever. I punched the upshift and pressed into the gas, the diesel engine responding with a grunt. The rig lunged forward, climbing. The last steep-grade dot, the sedan matched me, mirroring every throttle change, every deft tap of the brakes. When I hit the final hairpin, I drifted wide again, caught the guardrail, and my heart leapt into my throat as sparks flew. The trailer's wheels groaned. I checked my mirrors. The sedan drifted wide too, the metal kissing rock to avoid the rail. I screamed, slammed my fist on the dash. I knew then it wasn't just following. It was dancing with me at the summit. The road flattened for a short stretch before plunging down the other side. Somewhere in that flat stretch sat the repeater shack and a small gravel lot. I prayed there'd be a trucker or a patrol car, but the lights on the shack were dead. The door was closed, no lights inside. I coasted in, engine idling low, and cut the motor. Silence swallowed me. I waited. 10 seconds. 20. Then I heard it. The soft crunch of tires on gravel. I turned, saw the dark sedan glide into the lot, its headlights carving twin holes in the shadows. As it approached, my stomach dropped. There was no driver, no interior glow, no sign of life. Just that glassy surface, curved like a coffin lid, reflecting the starlight. I scrambled out of the cab, heart racing so loud I could almost hear it. The mountain wind was cold, sharper than night should be in West Texas. I fumbled for my phone. No signal. Perfect. I lifted the phone to the sky, swiveled it this way and that. Nothing. The sedan rolled to a stop 5 yards from me, headlights pinned on my chest like twin lasers. I stumbled back, reached for the cab door, and yanked it. Open, behind me, the car's headlights went out. I froze, hand on the door handle. The world turned black. The only sound was the beating of my own heart. I exhaled, then inhaled, then noticed the faintest flicker of light, just one headlight strobing back on. I risked a glance. The other lamp stayed dark. In the lit one, I saw it. The faint outline of a face, pale, with eyes that seemed empty, as if the light behind them was gone. It tilted, as though studying me. I swung the door shut and dove back into the cab, slamming the door. My hand shook as I turned the key. The engine caught with a shudder. The lights flickered. On Channel 19, I harnessed all the strength I had. This is Fort Davis Relay. I need any patrol or rig in range dark sedan, headlights one blinking, one dead. Summit of Davis Mountains. Repeat, Summit Davis Mountains. Silence. I jabbed the mic. Silence. The echo of my own voice mocked me. Outside, I heard the sedan's engine rev gently, like it was toying with me. Then tires on gravel, and it slid toward the cab. I stomped the brake and shifted into drive, then spun the wheel hard and slammed into the open road. The truck lunged. Forward, tires screeching against the gravel, and I shot down the mountain, gunning the diesel, pleading for signal. Halfway down the first hairpin, I caught movement in the mirror. The dark sedan carved into the switchback, no skid marks, no slide perfectly. Headlights on, only one, the other dark. And in the glow stood the silhouette of that thing, tall like a scarecrow with no straw, hands at its sides, shoulders. Hunched, it stared. Then it raised one hand, long fingers reaching out. I cried out, pressed the pedal to the floor. The rig surged, rattling through gears. My teeth chattered. I barreled past the boulder I'd seen before, past the junipers leaning, into the road. My headlights picked out nothing behind but darkness. Minutes passed hours, maybe before I hit flat ground again, and the rig's lights painted the horizon. The radio crackled barely, then a voice, "You okay, friend?" I choked out my location, and dispatch promised a patrol. I rolled to a stop at the nearest truck plaza, my vision swimming. When the officer arrived, his flashlight beam danced across the grill. We climbed back up that mountain in his SUV, searching for tracks, for anything. But the summit was empty. No guardrail marks, no skid, no replica tire imprints, no sign of the sedan or of me carving ghostly rivulets of brake dust across the curves. He wrote it off lost driver mechanical glitch. But I know what I saw. Nights later, I peek at my rearview mirror when I drive the same road. And sometimes, just sometimes, I swear I see a single headlight hovering behind me, glinting in the gloom, never blinking. And I know the switchback stalker still hunts. Those curves, waiting for the next driver to dance with. I hit the road as the sun bled out over the West Texas plains, the sky turning an angry shade of bruised purple. Mile after mile, my 18-wheeler's rumble was the only heartbeat in the night, tires humming over blacktop that stretched flat. As a blade, I'd been hauling grain from Amarillo to Laredo, a routine run I'd done a dozen times, but something felt off from the moment I rolled out. The air tasted metallic, and the horizon seemed to shiver like a mirage. I passed the last way station lights flickering, sign creaking in the wind, and kept my foot down. My rig's headlights carved twin beams into the gathering darkness, illuminating scrub brush and rusted fencing. Somewhere off to my right, an oil well pump jack swung its arm like a corpse breathing. I switched on the CB, expecting the usual static and half-hearted chatter, but it crackled only silence. No dispatch, no other rigs, not a whisper of life. Out here, I thought about pulling off for a quick nap at the next turnout. The caffeine was wearing off, and my eyelids were heavier than sandbags. Mile marker 47 appeared, half faded. I eased off the throttle, let the truck slow, and idled onto a gravel shoulder. The road behind me vanished into shadow, as if erased. In the rearview mirror, I caught sight of something that made my chest tighten. Another rig, parked 20 yards back, its outline identical to mine. Same make, same chrome grille, same logo, my logo stenciled on the side dot, my heart hammered. No way. Nobody else had my decals, my custom grill guard with a dent on the driver's side. Even the trailer tarp bore my handwritten name, J. Hargrove. I flicked the high beams on, floodlights burning through the night. The truck stayed, dark, inert, as if it knew to hide. I glanced down at the ignition key in my hand, a spare I'd pocketed in the cab. On a whim, I climbed out, gravel crunching under my boots, and walked toward the phantom rig. Closer now. I could see the tires sunk in loose stones, a thin film of dust coating the windshield. No driver, no running lights, no engine noise. A hollow echo. My breath hitched when I noticed the license plate. It read, Hargrove, exactly like mine. I ran a fingertip over the metal letters. It felt cold, too cold. I circled the front bumper, counting rivets, matching screw heads to the ones on my truck. Every detail was mirrored perfectly, like a twisted reflection. I yanked open the door. It swung wide with a groan. The cab was empty, the seat belt latch dangling. The dash was lit with the same soft green glow. I slid in, half expecting to see my own startled face in the mirror. Instead, the seat cradled thin air. My key fit the ignition. I swallowed. I'd never tried this key in another truck before, but it turned smoothly. The engine fired with a deep, resonant growl that felt wrong, too powerful, too alive. My rig's horn snarled twice, deep and hollow. The cab door slammed shut on its own. My stomach lurched. I reached for the door release, but the handle refused to budge. The windows began to mist, beads of moisture crawling inward like tiny ghosts. My breathing echoed unnaturally, amplified by the enclosed space. The gauges flickered and the speedometer's needle jumped to 60, though we were parked. My hand shook as I twisted the key off, but the engine hissed on, idling. Sparks danced across the rearview mirror, casting fractured shadows across. The cab. A voice, low and distant, rasped through the CB crackle. Come home. It was my voice, but stretched thin, echoing like it had passed through miles of empty highway. It said nothing else. I slammed my palm on the dash, and the lights went out, plunging me into darkness. The only glow came from the moonlight slicing through the windshield, illuminating the dashboard needles. Now pinned at red dot, my pulse pounded in my ears. I fumbled for the key, yanked it free. The engine died with a sigh like a wounded animal. Silence returned, thick and suffocating. I pried the door open and scrambled out, adrenaline roaring in my veins. The phantom rig sat still, its headlights dull, its engine quiet. I backed away, fear coiling around my spine. That's when I noticed the ground. Footprints, my footprints, leading from my cab to this one, but I'd never left that driver's seat. I'd climbed out only here, 20 yards away. And yet there they were, clear as gospel in the gravel, then stopping at the door. No return path. I knelt, pressing my palm into the last print. It was warm, like someone had just walked it. A breeze rattled the trees lining the highway mesquite, thorny and twisted. The oil pump jack creaked again, and the lone lamp on the way station winked back to life. The rig's taillights pulsed, red like a heartbeat, beckoning. I stumbled backward, hands out, tripping over stones. My flashlight tumbled from my jacket, its beam spinning until it died. I scrambled to my own truck, fumbling the key in the dark. The door snagged on the latch but gave way. I tumbled inside, tossed the rig key onto the passenger seat, and slammed the door. The engine sputtered, then roared awake when I turned my own key. The cab lights shivered on, and in the mirror I caught my reflection, sweat-soaked shirt, eyes wild. I gunned the engine and peeled out, tires spitting gravel. The phantom rig was gone. In the mirror, the shoulder was empty, just brush and cracked earth. My rig's horn blared once as I shot back onto the highway. A warning or a farewell, I couldn't tell which. I didn't stop again. The next town was 50 miles down, but I drove without slowing, staring at the road ahead until dawn cracked the sky. When morning came, I pulled into a gas station, hands still trembling. I checked the rearview mirror. No ghost rig. The world was just trucks, cars, and the usual bustle of commuters. I stared at my reflection again. My jaw ached from clenching. My name on the side of the trailer looked normal enough, but when I slid down the side to check the tire pressure, I nearly vomited. There, etched into the metal beside my name, was another name, Hargrove. But the J was gone. It read simply Hargrove. No initial, no first name, just the last name, silent and empty. And beneath it, in fine letters, someone had scribbled a date, the night before. July 1st, 2025. I backed away, heart hammering. The truck's engine pinned as it cooled. I reached for my phone to call dispatch, to call the highway patrol, to call someone who could explain this. But the signal was dead. The desert swallowed it all. I climbed back inside, turned the key, and the engine roared without complaint. I drove on, leaving that stop behind. But I know it's following me. Every mirror glance catches a shadow in the back windows, a shape where no trailer is. Every long stretch of road feels haunted, as if the night itself remembers that rig. And I keep hearing that voice on the CB, "Come home." My home is the cab of this truck. But whose voice is calling me? And what happens when I answer? I never should have stopped in the scrubby hollow beyond Klein's Bend. The sun was dipping low behind mesquite and mescaline brush, turning the sky the color of old bruises, and my rigged sleeper cab still humming from 14 hours on. The wheel was begging me to pull off the highway. I'd been hauling vintage jukeboxes from Amarillo to Corpus, a hot load that had me chasing every back road that promised a shortcut. By the time I caught sight of that lonely turnout, a gravel patch scuffed by old tire tracks, I was ready to sleep for a week. Parked the trailer angled toward the open fields and climbed down, my boots crumbling dust with each step. I'd been so focused on hauling my cargo 20 of those Art Deco beauties, each one paler than a faded postcard, that I forgot how silent the desert becomes at dusk. The only sound, besides my own breathing and the distant rustle of wind, through dried cow bones, was the faint hiss of the big rig's exhaust. I leaned against the cold metal side of the trailer and cracked open the small cooler by my feet, wishing for nothing but the sharp taste of lukewarm coffee. I didn't notice it at first, that tiny melody humming through the air. At first it felt like birdsong, too precise to be real birds. Then I realized it was a song one I knew too well but couldn't place. A slow, ragged tune. The kind of thing a jukebox and a greasy spoon might croak out at 2 a.m. Chords slipping in and out of tune like a drunken piano player. I tilted my head, listening. The song repeated exactly the same way each time. A single refrain, rapping and weaving, over and over, without end. There was no source, no neon sign. No old bar, no open window in sight. And yet I could swear it was coming from just beyond the edge of my vision, in the scrub grass and the shifting shadows of the roadside. I wanted to shrug it off. I told myself it was the wind picking up stray notes from a passing car's radio, or maybe the echoes of some outlaw country track someone had abandoned on a burned-out speaker. I stared back at the row of jukeboxes through the trailer's open bay, their chrome edges like skeletal smiles, their rounded tops like beaten hearts. The boxes bore the names of old labels, Wurlitzer, Seaberg, Rockola, each one glinting in the last purple light of evening. Inside, their inner mechanism sat silent, waiting for quarters. But the song, that damn song played on. I rose and walked around the trailer, half listening for a cell signal that never came. The air felt thick, as if the music had mass. My hands went clammy on the side rail of the cab. I stared down the empty road. Asphalt stretching like a wound, lined with brittle fence posts and the still forms of yucca. I thought I saw movement at the far end of the turnout, a flicker of white that might have been a rag tied to a branch, or the shirt of someone crouched behind a mesquite tree. I called out, voice hoarse, "Hello? Anybody out here?" Only the jukebox song replied, the same 3 chords minor, haunting, unresolved, folding into themselves. I started to circle back, my heart thumping with that old dread you get when you know you're not alone but you can't see the intruder. That's when I heard the hissing click of metal on metal, and the back door of the trailer swung shut. With a snap, it echoed through the hollow. The song crescendoed louder now, as if I'd awakened it, and then cut off abruptly, leaving a ringing silence in its wake. I spun around. The trailer doors were latched tight. I fumbled with the keys in my pocket, hands trembling. I needed to secure this place before I crawled back in the cab. But as I moved forward, the ground beneath my boots seemed hollow, like a trapdoor ready to give way. My flashlight beam cut through the dusk, illuminating nothing but dirt and roadside weeds. I shone it inside the trailer through one of the glass panels and saw those jukeboxes, inert, reflective, silent. No wires moved, no lights glowed. Yet I could still hear the echo of that melody, faint, muffled, as if it were playing somewhere deep inside the wood and brass. I remembered the old legends truckers' tales of cargo cults, pilgrimages, to forgotten airstrips where crates of consumer electronics would lie in the dust, worshipped like relics of some lost civilization. They said you'd find the remains of men gone mad, dancing around piles of broken radios and cameras, chanting at phantom transmissions. I laughed at the thought, the sound cracking like a rifle shot. I'd hauled my share of strange freight firearms, medical equipment, even a van full of embalmed cadavers once, but never jukeboxes that played by themselves. And then I heard it behind me. The slide of a heavy object. Soft thud against gravel. I whirled, flashlight swinging. There, half buried in the wash of shadows, was a battered metal speaker. It looked like one of those external amplifiers, the kind you mount on a deck to boost the sound. But I hadn't packed any speakers. No, this one came from somewhere else, somewhere I did not belong. The grill was crumpled, the paint flaked off, but I could see a tiny plaque. Martin Service Station, tip your waitress. Beneath, a hand-painted number, 66. Route 66. My blood chilled. If I'd driven west on old maps, I'd have scooped that speaker up and locked it away, but I was eastbound to Corpus. I bent to pick it up, fingers brushing the cracked husk of the cone. The moment I touched it, the song returned, only now it seemed inside my head. Each note a rusted nail tapped into my skull. I staggered back, dropping the piece like a hot coal. It tumbled into the weeds, and the music broke apart into jarring staccato notes, then went silent once more. Panic rose in me. I could feel it slithering along my spine, a cold thing with many legs. The jukeboxes, I needed to load them up and leave. I fumbled for the trailer keys in the cab, fumbling at the lock with shaking thumbs. The world narrowed down to the heavy hinge of that door, the weight of iron and freight pressing on my shoulders. Finally, it gave way. I jumped in, slammed the door, and locked it. Inside the cab, the engine was idling, windows steamed over. I turned the key, thumbed the radio knob, all static, but in the crackle I heard it again, the faintest hint of that tune trailing off between bursts of white noise. I slammed my hand onto the CB mic. "Breaker, breaker," I rasped. "Anybody copy?" A flurry of static, then nothing. I shifted the rig back onto the pavement, the taillights carving two red scars through the gathering dark. The jukebox song did not follow me. There was nothing but the steady rumble of tires on asphalt, the wind rippling through the trailer's side panels. I didn't stop until the horizon swallowed the last sliver of sunset, and I rolled back onto the interstate, the night swallowing me whole. Later, when I finally dropped the load at the warehouse in Corpus and pried open the last box, I found only empty coin slots and polished glass. No speakers, no wires. Just the hum of fluorescent lights overhead and that jukebox melody circling in my head, repeating its broken refrain long after I'd gone home and pulled the covers over my ears. It plays still in the dark corners of my mind, looping forever like a ghostly record stuck on a groove that never ends. The sun had slipped below the horizon hours ago, leaving the highway a dusty ribbon of darkness stretching off into nothing. I eased my rig onto the shoulder, the headlights cutting twin arcs of light through the gathering haze. My breath fogged. The cab's windshield as I reached for the thermos bitter. Coffee kept me awake on nights like this, but something else caught my eye first. The little red relay light blinked on the monitor by the passenger seat, the livestock trailer's CCTV feed flickering to life. I squinted at the screen, expecting to see the herd I'd hauled in from Amarillo, but the stall was empty, cold, and echoing with a hush of metal and rubber. My brow furrowed. I double-checked every latch before setting out. I climbed down to the trailer door, the gravel crunching under my boots. The air tasted of sage and oil, and somewhere ahead a lone coyote yipped before silence swallowed the sound. My flashlight beam cut a swath through the gloom as I eased the latch open, expecting an animal or two to stare back at me. But the stall held no cows, no goats, nothing living. Instead, the beam fell on rows-perfect, sickening rows of animal. Skulls, dozens of them, shoulder to shoulder, lined up like soldiers waiting for inspection. Horned skulls with jagged fissures, delicate deer heads stripped clean to ivory, smaller skulls with empty eye sockets that seemed to leer at me from all angles. My heart thudded ugly against my ribs. The herd was missing. My only cargo was this macabre display, the bones arranged with deliberate care. I swallowed, mouth dry, and reached to touch one, the porcelain-cold slant of a cow's skull, yet my hand trembled too much to steady. I flicked my flashlight off, stepped back, and let darkness take me. Then I heard it, the faint scrape of bone against metal, the soft thunk of skull shifting on the floor. My flashlight flicked back on, and one skull had rolled an inch closer to the door. My breath caught. Maybe the wind had moved it. My mind scrambled for rational explanations. Wind, vibration, some trick of perspective in the narrow stall. I forced a tight laugh, holstering my flashlight and nodding to myself. I'd driven this highway for 20 years and seen my share of strange, but this was a new kind of wrong. I yanked the door shut, bolted it, and climbed back into the cab. The CCTV monitor lit up again, but I powered it off, deciding to check the stall at first light. I needed the sleep. Tomorrow I'd reattach a load and move on. I dozed fitfully, waking every half hour to an ache in my shoulder or the rumble of a distant 18-wheeler. At one point I dreamt I heard the skulls whispering, a low susurrus of bone on bone, chanting a name I couldn't place. I sat up quick, scanning the dark cab, only the hum of idling diesel and my own ragged breath. I shook my head and reached for the coffee. When dawn finally bled into the sky, I yawned and stretched before stepping out again. The trailer door felt cooler than I'd left it, the metal bar slick under my fingers. I unlatched it and swung the door open and nearly fell over backward. The skulls were gone. In their place lay the same patch of empty steel floor I'd first seen on the monitor. No bones, no bodies, nothing. I shuffled inside, shining my flashlight on every corner for any sign of ancient ivory, but the stall was pristine. No scuffs, no grooves, nothing but the faint smell of mildew and diesel. My pulse hammered. I stumbled out and circled, flashlight, sweeping the ground, but there was no sign of the skulls having slipped out. No animal bones in the dust, no tire tracks from a backhoe or skid marks from anything. I backed away, staring at the empty trailer as if my own eyes had betrayed me. I glanced at my rig. Its chrome bumper gleamed in morning light, the highway stretching on behind me like a promise of escape. I climbed back in, ignited the engine, and rolled forward. As I passed mile marker 197, I dared a glance at the CCTV monitor. The screen showed the stall again, bones lined up like sentinels, but this time the camera angle was wrong. I hadn't repositioned it. My hands tightened on the wheel, knuckles white. The head stared straight into the lens, eye sockets blacker than midnight. One of them seemed to tilt, as if nodding at me, acknowledging my presence. I flicked the monitor off and wiped sweat. From my forehead, though the cab was cold, the miles blurred. I refused to look back again, fingers locked on the wheel, mind racing. I tried to tell myself it was a prank, some backroad ghost story come to life, some local kid's idea of a joke, but there'd been no chance for anyone to haul the bones, line them up, and vanish in the night. No suction of traffic that could hide a cargo of skulls. It made no sense, and yet it had happened. By noon, I was at a rest stop just outside El Paso, easing to a halt among a half-dozen rigs. I killed the engine and sat, waiting. I needed to breathe. I glanced at the monitor. Dark. Off. My resolve cracked. I clicked it on. The stall was empty again, just steel plates, bolts, and the seam where the floor met the wall. No skulls. I leaned forward, pressing my forehead to the wheel. I didn't want to play whatever sick game this was. I left the trailer there, at the rest stop, and went inside to grab lunch. When I came out, someone had knocked down half the cereal boxes in the small convenience store, but I found nobody in sight. On the asphalt, muddy footprints led away toward the highway I'd just driven. I scanned for license plates, faces, anything. but the lot was deserted. I climbed back in my rig and sat. I thought of calling dispatch, telling them I'd had to break down some excuse to keep them off my back. I flipped the monitor on one last time. This time, the skulls were there again, pressed close to the camera, 20 empty sockets staring right into mine. I shut off the monitor, slammed my fist on the dash. My mind screamed. I threw the rig in gear, peeled out of the lot, and didn't stop until the sun was a pulsing glare on the horizon and the desert had swallowed me whole. I still carry the memory of those skulls at night, when the highway hum drops to a whisper and I think I see shapes shifting in the darkness behind me. The next load was cattle from Lubbock, and I double-checked every latch, every bolt. There's no skulls on that stall and no more red wreck light blinking. But sometimes, when the freight is heavy and the sky is empty, I swear I feel the weight of a dozen empty heads staring through the walls, waiting for their moment to slip back in. And I drive faster. I remember the first time the static came through, brittle as dry leaves in autumn wind, cutting through the hum of my engine like a serrated blade. It was just past midnight when I eased my rig off the shoulder of Farm to Market Road 127 in East Texas. The moon was a thin sliver, scattering silver across the cracked asphalt, and the air smelled of damp pine and rotting kudzu. I'd been hauling feed silos from Waco to Beaumont, nearly 700 miles on a loop I'd driven 100 times, but tonight felt off. Tonight felt too quiet. I flipped the CB mic up, expecting only my own reflection in its unlit grill. Instead, a rasping voice broke through, low and urgent. "Breaker, breaker, can anybody read me? The words gurgled, and then the speaker coughed, like someone gasping underwater. My heart lurched. There'd been stories truckers, whispering about old Frank Mullins, a hauler who ran this very stretch and crashed his Peterbilt against an oak 10 years ago. They said the wreck was so bad they never found his body, just shards of skull tangled in the grill. Over the years, restless voices crackled on radios. "Need a lift. Don't leave me," all in that raspy drawl. I'd shrugged them. Off-truck stop folklore, nothing more. But now it was here, waking me from the lull of diesel and dead radio waves. I tapped the mic. "This is Big Red. Who am I talking to?" Static. Then a sigh, mournful as wind through a corpse's lungs. It's me, Frank." The name hit me like a crowbar. Chills knifed down my spine. I pressed the mic, voice steadier than I felt. "Frank? Frank Mullins? You're Jesus." My words faded as the road lamps glowed orange in the distance, the darkness beyond their reach like open jaws. 10 years, he whispered. 10 years I've been stuck here. His voice cracked, pleading. I can't. Move on. I need someone to tell my story. The static flared, and beneath it, another voice, a woman's, softly weeping, drowned in feedback. My knuckles turned white. I looked out the windshield. The highway stretched black and endless. No sign of another rig, no pulsing red lights behind me. Only that lonely ribbon cutting through pine and pasture. I shifted in my seat. "Frank, what happened to you?" Silence. Then a wet, rasping breath. His words rushed like a flood. They took me off the road, pulled me through the woods. I fought them. They listened to my screams, laughed. I could smell the gasoline when they burned the rig. A burst of crackle erased him, then he was there again, voice thin as a mourner's wail. "Tell them, or I'll make you feel it." A knot coiled in my gut. I thumbed the mic to my lips. "Make me feel what, Frank?" "Your mirrors," he said softly. "Watch your mirrors." My side mirrors trembled in the night breeze. I stared through them. Nothing moved behind, just empty highway and pines. But then, was that a shape? I blinked, and it vanished. Static grew louder, voices snarling in chemical hiss. I couldn't leave him hanging. My job was simple: haul freight, deliver loads, keep wheels turning. This was outside anything I'd signed on for. But as the engineer who'd driven through those woods, I felt a tingle of duty. I clicked the mic. "Stay with me. Tell me what happened next." He coughed, a hacking rasp that sounded like bones grinding. I tried to drive away. They smashed the headlights. My rig rolled over. I crawled out. I remember the taste of blood on my tongue, and they stabbed me. God, the pain! His voice choked, cut by static that spit embers of hate. They laid me under the rig, pinned me, couldn't scream, couldn't cry. Just felt hot and cold at once, like being buried alive while set afire. My hand slipped through the mud. I begged the highway to swallow me. The mic squealed with a surge of interference, and I slammed it down. I sat frozen, breath shallow, blood pumping thunder in my ears. I should have switched the radio off, raced for help, called dispatch. But I was tethered, drawn by the echo of his agony. The headlights of a patrol cruiser appeared ahead, blue and red painting the pines in murderous hues. I flicked on my flashers and coasted to a stop behind the cruiser, heart hammering. The officer stood by his car, illuminated by flickering light, talking into his radio. I rolled down my window. He glanced at me, eyes hollow with boredom or something. "Darker. Problem, driver?" I swallowed. "License and registration." He peered at my paperwork, then at me. "Just routine," he said, voice flat, distant. "Mind switching off that CB? Static's messing with my comms?" I nodded. Flicked the channel off. The speaker fell silent, leaving only the click of machinery and my ragged breath. I watched him walk back to his cruiser, then turn the radio back on. Static. Relief washed over me until a soft murmur seeped through, a love song slowed to. A dirge. It carried words I recognized. "I'm sorry." "Forgive me." I gripped the wheel. No channels left active. The world outside held its breath. Then, in the song's last dying note, a voice. "You won't forget me." The patrol. Lights winked out as the cruiser rolled toward me, engine muted in the night. I felt the hair on my arms rise. I caught a glimpse in my right mirror, a flicker of movement. A figure in an oil-slick jacket, face blurred, standing beside the cruiser. The patrolman waved me on. I edged forward. The figure stretched long limbs, spectral in the sodium glow, then melted into the shadows. My heart skidded. I thumbed the mic. "Frank, are you there? What do you want me to say?" A rattling laugh, brittle as dry bones. Then his voice. "Tell them I didn't die alone. Tell them I begged. Tell them I asked for mercy." I nodded, though he couldn't see. My vision swam with tears I fought to swallow. "I will," I whispered. "I swear." The highway swallowed me again, the rig's rumble a dull roar beneath my skin. I fought to keep my eyes on the road, but my mind spun pictures of his final moments. Muscle and bone torn, the smell of gasoline and fear mingling in the cold night air. I pressed the mic to my mouth. "Breaker, breaker. Attention all units. 10 years ago tonight, on January 5th, 2015, trucker Frank Mullins died on FM 127 when unknown assailants attacked his rig. He pleaded for mercy and never got a chance to live again. I'm Big Red, and I remember him." My voice trembled, but I held it steady. Static answered me, distant voices ghosting across the channels. But one clear voice lingered. "Thank you." Then gone. The roar of my engine swallowed me, and for miles the radio remained silent. When dawn cut through the pines, pale and uncertain, I pulled into the Waco yard. I stepped from the rig, legs rubbery as jelly, and looked back down that stretch of highway. The asphalt glistened in morning dew, innocent as a child's blanket. Nothing stirred. I filed my report, mentioned nothing of ghosts or police. But that night, when I shut off the lights and lay on the hard cot in my sleeper, I heard it again through the rig speakers, a soft whisper, a plea. Don't forget me. I didn't, and I never will. I'd been on the road so long that the horizon began to feel like an old friend I couldn't remember. The miles stretched out before me, a ribbon of cracked asphalt cutting through scrub and mesquite, under a sky half hidden by low, roiling clouds. My rig, a battered freightliner with more scars than paint, rumbled along at a steady clip, headlights piercing the gathering dusk. I'd left Fort Stockton hours ago, hauling a load of machinery parts bound for Lubbock, and by then the world was already shriveling to nothing more than the 2 strips of yellow line and the shoulder. Rolling away beneath my tires' dot had happened just after the road curved east, where the land spilled open into scrubland that felt more desert than pasture. One moment nothing existed beyond my cab besides the dull drone of the engine. The next, a jackrabbit exploded into view, its long ears pinned back as it bolted across the road. Its coat shimmered in my headlights, dust settled on the black brush, clinging to the rabbit's haunches like a second skin. I stomped the brakes, but it was gone by the time the tires scrubbed asphalt, only the echo of its paws in the gravel to mark its passing. I eased back onto the gas, jaw tight, chalking it up to the usual wildlife hazards of West Texas nights. Half an hour later, just past a faded sign reading next services 78 miles, it happened again. I'd stopped for coffee at a makeshift roadside diner hours before, tapped out on my CB that I was heading west, but the lull had left me restless. I'd threaded another wave of country music through my earbuds and settled back into the monotony of night driving. Then, without warning, there it was again, the same jackrabbit, darting from the shoulder just off my right wheel. Headlights caught it mid-leap, limbs folding beneath it as though it had sprung from nowhere. I swerved, hard hammering, tires skidding as I fought the urge to slam on the anchors. The rabbit vanished in a puff of dust. My pulse wouldn't slow. I rubbed my temples and flicked on the overhead light. Gauzy webs of exhaustion clung to my lids. Maybe I was nodding off. Or maybe the desert heat had finally claimed my mind. But the road stayed empty, the silence pressing in until I felt like it was smothering me. I told myself to shake it off, convinced myself it was fatigue. I set my jaw, cranked the wheel straight, and pressed on. It came back every 15, maybe 20 miles. Always the same corner, or so it felt, though I couldn't have sworn on a map which one. Each appearance was more startling, more impossible than the last. First, the rabbit was a blur at the edge of my vision. Next, it stood on its hind legs for a split second before darting across, ears twitching. My rig fishtailed again. I nearly lost control. Each time, I imagined chunks of hair tumbling beneath my wheels. Instead, I saw only dust. By the time I passed the ghost town sign, Lenora, population 12, I was certain something was wrong. That stop had been closed for years, the cafe and gas pumps rusting fossils under a shuttered awning. But the feeling that I'd driven this road 100 times before, seen this rabbit a dozen times in my life, bent my brain. My knuckles whitened on the wheel. I switched the radio off. All I could hear was the engine and breath, shallow and ragged. The third time I hit that curve, the rabbit paused in the middle of the road. Its eyes caught the glow of my lights and reflected back like tiny lanterns. I slammed the brakes again. The world pitched forward. My rig groaned, wheels locked. Time slowed so that I saw every hair on the rabbit's coat, every wire of its twitching whiskers. Then it bolted, but not away from me, in my direction, straight toward the grill. I spun the wheel hard, the trailer jackknifing, tires screaming. When I righted the rig, the rabbit was at my window, 2 glowing pinpricks hovering in the dark beside the shadowed door. I cut the engine, sat staring out at that bleeding gaze. Somewhere behind me the road rolled on, nothing but silent asphalt. Into the void. I reached for the door handle, hand trembling so hard I nearly dropped the keys. The thing at the window didn't move. It just stared as though waiting. The air cooled suddenly, and I watched my breath coil in uneven clouds against the glass. Slowly, I unlocked the door and reached out. My fingertips brushed the cold metal of the handle, and then the window cracked inward, splintering in a spider web of glass. I jerked back, the door swinging open only a sliver as wind and dust howled around us. There, pressed against the broken pane, was the rabbit's head too large for its body, face elongated, teeth bared in a grin no animal should be capable of. Its eyes glowed orange, pupils thin as they fixed on me. The fur around its mouth was wet, matted with something dark. I twisted away, slammed the door, and threw the rig into gear. Tires bit into the gravel shoulder as I gunned the engine and fishtailed onto the road. The trailer slapped against pavement. Gears ground as I shifted. Sweat and dust plastered my shirt to my back. Behind me, the broken window rattled in the frame like a drumbeat. I didn't dare check the mirrors. I just drove, foot heavy on the pedal, the world outside a blur of moonlight and scrub brush. The rabbit's stare burned behind me, seared into my lids every time I closed my eyes. My headlights fell on nothing until a shape flickered in the beam. There, crouched in the center of the lane, was the rabbit again, only bigger, taller, its ears impossibly long, legs folded like a demon ready to spring. I veered off tires, sliding sideways into the dirt. The rig yawed, trailer fishtailed. I straightened it again, heart thrumming so loud I thought the cab would shake apart. I glanced down at the speedometer 90, 100. I didn't care. I couldn't stop. Now, the road stretched empty ahead, but I felt its mouth opening, felt the rabbit's eyes on my neck, on the back of my head, waiting. My throat worked as I sucked air in ragged gulps. I kept driving and driving, past mile markers I couldn't read, past horizons that never ended. At some point the sky lightened, dawn bleeding into the atmosphere. In that pale light I slowed, hands still shaking on the wheel. The desert seemed empty, benign. I tried to laugh, a hollow sound that cracked in my throat. I told myself I was hallucinating, told myself rabbits didn't smile, didn't glow. I told myself put me to sleep, but I was wide awake. I crested a gentle rise, and in the distance I saw it, a pair of glowing eyes perched like lanterns on the road. Heart in my throat, I froze on the hump. Then I swear to you I heard a voice, distant and broken, like wind through cottonwood leaves. Don't look back. I floored it. Sand flew. Mirrors rattled. The dawn light broke over the ridge like a promise. I didn't slow until I hit the highway to Odessa, where the world felt real again, where stoplights existed and phone signals clung to the air like webs. I parked in a 24-hour lot, engine ticking as it cooled. I climbed down, legs rubbery, and stared back along the road. The jackrabbit was gone. No tracks, no sign. I called dispatch and told them something came up. I wouldn't make it to Lubbock. Today, I turned away, chest heaving, head buzzing with static. Somewhere out there in the dust and the low scrub, the rabbit waited, eyes still glowing, promising it wasn't done with me yet. And I knew some terrifying part of me knew that. It was right. I felt the gauge click and freeze the way you'd imagine the end of something. The needle jammed at empty as the sun beat down on the endless stretch of asphalt ahead. Sweat beaded at my hairline, trickled down my neck, but the engine kept its steady growl, pushed me onward mile after mile as if the diesel tank were somewhere deep under the desert floor, feeding itself from some hidden reserve. At first, I thought it was a fault, an electrical glitch in the dashboard telling me lies, but then the road began to hum under my wheels, a low vibration that throbbed through the frame of the rig and into my bones. That hum felt like a heartbeat, and I realized too late it wasn't mine. Somewhere behind the mirrors, something was alive. I glanced at the fuel meter again, 0, but the odometer clicked on, unrelenting. Each turn of the wheel leaving me lighter, a little less me, the way you lose pieces of yourself on a long stretch of lonely road, but this was different. This was mechanical, clinical. With every mile, my boots felt loose, the straps on my spine loosening as if I were stepping out of my own skin. I tried the CB radio, static. Nothing but white noise that crackled like distant screams. Far too faint to decipher, but present enough to press into my skull like a cold hand. The sky above shimmered in wavering heat waves, but the horizon stayed, unnaturally sharp, like someone had drawn a straight line with a ruler. I passed an old gas station abandoned. Pumps rusted and their hoses curled like dead snakes, but I pulled in anyway, desperate for something. Reassurance, shade, the illusion of rescue. My boots crunched on the gravel as I swung the door open. The cab was bone dry, the driver's seat imprint softly worn, waiting. I stepped out, heart pounding, the rig door clanging shut behind me, and in that hollow echo I heard a whisper, so soft I thought the wind had slipped through the broken glass. Panels. Keep going. It sounded like me, my own voice warped by distance, and I braced my palm against the hood, running it along the steel, feeling the pulse of the engine beneath. The whisper came again, "You're almost there." I shook, my head dizzy, the heat swallowing the station hole, and staggered back to the rig. The driver's door unlocked itself. I didn't want to go in, but something propelled me, fear mixed with a curious certainty that the road held an answer I couldn't find standing still. Once inside, the windows fogged as if I'd exhaled a lifetime's worth of breath, and the rearview mirror shimmered in the haze. At first, I saw my pale reflection, bloodless and drawn, eyes rimmed with red dust. Then movement behind me, a shape coalescing in the darkness of the sleeper berth. No light shone there, but the shape was there, solid and waiting. I blinked, and it took a step forward, a silhouette with ragged edges, as though torn from a photograph and pressed into 3 dimensions. The gauge still read 0, but the tachometer trembled, each flicker of its needle matching the ragged breathing in the berth slow, deliberate, the beat of something old and unquiet. My stomach twisted. I tried to start a sentence, but the engine answered for me, revving without my input, throwing me back into the seat with a jolt that rattled teeth in my skull. Then all at once, silence. The engine cut, the vibration ceased, and I was suspended in stillness, floating in a weightless void that carried the reek of burning oil and rust. And then the rig lurched forward, rolling on as if gravity itself had flipped, and I was tumbling backward into the seatbelt. The road unreeled before me like a black ribbon. But the landscape was wrong. The scrub brush leaned the wrong way, the telephone poles arced toward me like prison bars. Each milepost I passed glowed faintly, and as I zoomed by, they dissolved into little sparks of light, vanishing like stars winking out at dawn. My chest felt emptier with each marker, like the world was siphoning off bits of me, memories, names, my mother's voice. I tried to scream, but no sound came. The cab was sealed in vacuum. The whisper returned, multiplied, a chorus of voices. Almost there, almost yours. Panic bloomed in my ears, blood pounding like drums in a funeral march. My vision trembled, and I saw the figure in the mirror again, but this time it had eyes, hollow pits that glowed with a pale blue light. Its smile stretched too wide, too hungry. Then the world tore open. Not the asphalt or the sky, but the space between them, a fissure that ran the length of the windshield. Light, sickly and green, spilled in and froze my bones where they sat. The rig slowed, coasting to a halt in mid-engine, engine off, gauge still at 0. The whisper stopped. The voices fell silent. My reflection in the mirror split down the middle, each half peeling away until all I saw was the thing behind me. Stepping into the seat, I tasted ash on my tongue. My hands, still on the wheel, felt insubstantial, like they belonged to somebody who'd driven this route long ago. The figure reached out, long fingers brushing my face, and I felt a pull, as though it were dragging me out of my own body. With a single pull, I was collapsing inward, no flesh, just a hollow shell, an echo rattling through hollow steel. When the headlights finally died, the rig rolled backward into darkness, crossing a threshold I could not name. The next day, a highway patrolman found the rig abandoned at the edge of a ravine, engine cold and empty but still running. He climbed in and found the driver's door locked from the inside. Fuel gauge set solid at 0, odometer unbroken, highway stretching off into the horizon as if nothing had happened. No blood, no body, just the rig, humming softly, waiting for its next occupant to see the fuel gauge freeze and believe that running on empty can carry you farther than you ever wanted to go. I remembered the day my rig first trembled on that bridge, the way the air seemed to shiver around me before the wood groaned. It was late afternoon, the sun hanging low over scrubby oaks and thornbush, turning the encroaching creek into a molten ribbon. I'd been hauling livestock feed across the back roads of West Texas, the kind of roads most folks avoid after sunset, the kind that swallow headlights and echo with things best left unheard. The bridge of bones was barely marked at, crumbling arch of rotting timber spanning a shallow creek that smelled faintly of rot and moss. It was narrow, just wide enough for my 18-wheeler's trailer, and so isolated that I almost missed it, its warning post long since snapped off or carved away by road's end lovers and drifters. I eased onto the planks, the trailer groaning behind me like a dying beast. Wheels thumped, and for a moment I thought I'd hear the creek gurgle beneath, but instead there was silence, a heavy, pregnant hush that pressed against my windows. Then the first crack splintered through the stillness, a sudden, jagged scream of timber letting go. I froze, hands white on the wheel, heart hammering so loud I thought the other drivers might hear it if there'd been anyone else around. The fudgy. Planks fractured under the weight, and for just a heartbeat the floor of the bridge gave way to the air, and I caught sight of something lining the span's underside. Skulls, dozens of them, crammed together so tightly their hollow eyes formed. A mottled pattern of pale bone and shadow rattling as the engine idled. They rattled like they were alive, each tiny clatter a dry, mocking whisper that seemed to repeat in time with the low thrum of my engine. I slammed the transmission into neutral and applied the brakes, but inertia bullied me forward. The trailers. Momentum carried me over the broken boards, each axle thudding like gunshots, and I could feel the skulls shifting beneath me. Something in that rattle sang of old grief, of lives broken here one by one, and the dust kicked up by my tires curled around me like gas, stinging my eyes. I tried to look away. I stared straight ahead at the highway stretching out on the far bank, the sun's last rays striking the yellow line like a promise that I'd make it through. But my peripheral vision kept dragging me back to the timber beneath my rig. Shadows danced between the gaps where planks had snapped, and for a moment I thought I saw a shape clamber forward, a gaunt figure slipping between slats and moving with the skid of my wheels. It was gone before I blinked, but the sense of eyes human, watching remained. My breathing rasped. My knees shook on the gas pedal. I couldn't reverse. There was nothing to grab onto except the broken wood and the creek bed, and the bridge felt ready to swallow me whole if I tried. So I steered forward, clutching the wheel until the knuckles bled white crescents. The rumble of bones and timber echoing beneath me until the solid pavement sucked away the noise like a vacuum, and I coasted onto the straightaway before cutting. The engine, listening for anything beyond the hiss of hot metal cooling in the evening air, rested my head against the seat back and tried to rationalize what I'd just seen. Maybe I'd hit a rut that splintered the underside cover, exposed some old cattle skulls that a farmer had dumped decades ago, and the vibration made them clatter. That explanation felt feeble, even to me. The bones seemed too many, too carefully placed, like a macabre mosaic designed to lure someone into crossing at the wrong time. I glanced back through the rearview mirror. The bridge was just there, dark and silent, its broken boards smeared black with river silt. No skulls were visible. From that angle, just rotten planks and the yawning blackness beneath. I rubbed my temples, tasted copper on my tongue. I tried the starter. The engine caught and settled into its familiar growl, and I shifted into drive to edge farther away, but something in the comfortable thrum felt wrong. The rattle of the bones had imprinted itself in my mind, an itch I couldn't scratch. I didn't sleep that night. I found a turnout under a floodlight 3 miles down the highway and sat all night, RADIO static pressing at the edges of the cab, every creak of the chassis sounding like footsteps pacing just outside the sleeper door. At dawn, I tried again. To prove I wasn't losing my grip, I headed back up the road. The bridge of bones lay asleep beneath a mist that rose from the creek, and the world smelled like wet earth and pine tar. My wheels rolled onto those rotten planks once more, and the wood groaned as if exhaling a warning. I hit the same spot, only this time the boards didn't break. The underside was hidden. I couldn't see any skulls. Everything looked normal, and I forced myself to drive on, feeling ridiculous for believing in ghosts. A week later, I came back with company. 2 other drivers, old pals who'd laughed when I told them the tale. I guided their rigs across one. At a time, both made it safely across. We stood on the far side, peering back. The bridge looked undisturbed, solid enough that it deserved a fresh coat of planks. "All in your head, man," they said, clapping me on the back. We left markers on the guardrails and drove on. That afternoon, halfway to Lubbock, I got a call. One friend's rig had toppled on the bridge. He was gone. No survivors. Authorities blamed a structural failure, worst rot in history, they said, but the photos they sent me showed pristine new boards. No fractures, no exposed underside. For a moment, I thought I was losing my mind. Every river crossing since started to feel alive. The I-10 overpasses, the tiny cattle guards on farm roads, they all whispered. I'd hear distant crashes, ghost trucks barreling on empty stretches, then silence. At truck stops, I'd catch strangers staring at my sleeper like they'd seen something move inside. I tried changing routes, altering schedules, avoiding rivers altogether, but it always pulled me back. A voice in my head, dry and clicking like bone on wood, urging me to return. The bridge of bones became a magnet, drawing me across in the dead of night, as if some unfinished business demanded my crossing again and again. Last night, I trailed. An 18-wheeler eastbound on a county road wrapped in fog so thick the lights barely penetrated. Up ahead, 2 sets of headlights flickered on the ridge, then vanished. The highway curved down toward a creek I didn't recognize until I saw the broken timbers. Same bridge. Exactly the same. The yellow paint on the guardrails looked fresh, like someone had replaced the posts overnight. I braked and cut the engine. Heart drumming. This wasn't possible. The map said the original bridge was 20 miles west. But the creek here rippled over stones carved into skull shapes, and the timber of the span was the same faded gray, each plank matching the others, in grain and rot pattern. The mist curled through the gaps like breath. I killed my headlights and sat in blackout, listening. A slight crack. A faint clatter. I knew what lay beneath. Somewhere upstream, the water sloshed against stones no one knew were there, and bones arranged themselves into rows, waiting to rattle in time with the living. I reached for the CB, but the voice came through without it, low and hollow, speaking in clicks that resolved into English. Come home. No shout, just the dry syllables tapping in my skull. It sounded like the bridge itself, coaxing, patient. I gripped the wheel and counted to 3, then floored it, wheels screaming over the cracked boards. The skulls rattled as we crossed, time drying up until all that remained was the echo inside my head. Then I was on solid ground again, engine roaring, blood pounding, the road stretching empty before me. I dared a glance back. The bridge of bones stood silent in the fog, but I could swear the center plank shifted, revealing a knot of ivory teeth turning toward me, waiting for my return. I always thought the desert highway was empty at 3 in the morning, that nothing stirred out there beyond the occasional roadrunner or the distant drip of an oil well pump. But that night, when my headlights caught the gleam of chrome on the horizon, it wasn't the usual tumble of rigs hauling livestock or grain. It was a line 3, 4, maybe a dozen of identical 18-wheelers, each one so like the next that they might have been facsimiles stamped from the same mold. Their paint was a dull pewter, streaked with the faintest tracery of dust. But more than anything, I remember the way their headlights cut through the gloom like twin grazing beasts, eyes fixed on me, unblinking and hungry. I slowed my old Kenworth, the engine's rumble echoing off empty highway pillars. The rigs came up fast, closer than any trucker should let another come at that hour. My tachometer trembled 405 just as the first one thundered past, its wheels hissing on asphalt. The air shivered behind it, scorching the road in a curling wave of heat. I saw the blackened pavement where its tires had pressed, a trail of charred ribbon stretching back into the dark. It smelled like old kerosene and something fouler, like burnt flesh. My shirt clung to my back as the second rig roared by, their engines synchronized in a low, throbbing chant that seemed less mechanical than a live dot by the time the last of them passed. I was sitting in a swirl of dust, heart hammering. My mirrors caught a glimpse of an empty ribbon of highway, save for that scorched vein where they had flashed through. I punched the CB. Anyone see that convoy? Over. Only static answered, a hiss that tasted of static and warning. I flicked the radio through channels, AB, FM music, the scanner for deer call hunters, but nothing. Even the night seemed to hold its breath. A mile. Marker slid past. 143. I'd driven this stretch dozens of times. This was the dead zone they warned about. The 6-mile stretch with no cell reception, no aid stations, no slowing lights from any town. After that, I'd hit Santa Rosa, population 800, everything shuttered at midnight. It was a road built straight through scrub and mesquite, a ribbon of asphalt that promised nothing but stars and the low whistle of the wind. But my mind clung to those rigs. Those rigs were going east, towards home. I cut across the empty stretch, no more than 5 minutes before the black scar ended and the road rejoined the familiar 2-lane. My phone lit up 2 bars. I swore under my breath, hit speed dial for my sister Maggie, who ran the diner behind the gas station in town. Maybe she'd seen something. Maybe her waitress had clocked trucks passing in a ghostly procession. Inside, the station's fluorescent lights buzzed. I parked, stared down the endless ribbon running back toward the desert. The air inside smelled like fresh coffee and bleach. Maggie was wiping down the counter. I saw them, I blurted. She froze, rag and mid-wipe, pale under the harsh lights. Convoy of rigs, all the same. They scorched the road. She blinked, then her face lost color. You're joking. She set the rag down. It's 3 in the morning, Shobi. Who's playing a prank? Her voice wavered. I'm serious. I pulled my cap off, rubbed my forehead. 4 rigs? Maybe more. Metal gray, no company logo, moving as one. When they passed, the tar was blackened. I could still smell it. Still hear the low growl in my chest. She shook her head, backing away like I had a rattlesnake at my feet. You need rest. Come inside. Coffee's on me. Her tone tiptoed between sympathy and fear. I'll wake Dad. I raised my hands. No. I need to know if anybody else. A distant roar swallowed my words. The diner's doors rattled. 2 headlights broke the gloom outside, sliding across the pumps. I stared. They weren't rigs, just a battered pickup and a beat-up SUV, but they slowed to a crawl, and a man in a high-visibility vest climbed from the truck, head bowed, like he was carrying a weight I couldn't see. The SUV idled, door opened, and a woman stepped out, hair tangled, eyes wide. They looked like they'd come from the desert, like they'd seen what I'd seen. Maggie fumbled for the bell behind the counter, rang it. No chime. The power flickered, then died, leaving us in a hush thicker than ink. Outside, the rigs returned, crawling out of the black ribbon of scorched asphalt, moving like zombies summoned from the earth. Their engines were a whispered chant. Now, as if they were listening for a signal, I grabbed Maggie's arm, yanked her behind the counter. That's them, I mouthed. They're back. The man and woman flattened themselves beside the pumps, watching the rigs converge on the diner like vultures circling prey. Their faces were blank slates. A horn sounded, low and ironic. One of the rigs paused in front of the pumps, its engine idling deep. The ignition glowed red, though there was no flame. My ears buzzed. I stepped out, fists clenched, heart splitting my ribs. The driver's door creaked open. A shadow rolled out, not quite human, a smear of silhouette wearing a trucker's cap. It lifted an arm, beckoned. The other rigs braked in unison, tires spitting pebbles. I realized I was crying. My mouth tasted like metal. Maggie grabbed me, shaking. Shobi, no! I took one step forward. The creature tilted its head, voice guttural, echoing inside my skull. You saw us. It wasn't a question. You know why we run. I did. The stories, whispered by old hands in dusty cafes about the convoy of the forsaken, rigs driven. By souls lost on the road, doomed to endless passage until they claimed one more home. My hometown. Santa Rosa. The place I grew up in, the one I couldn't wait to leave. Now it was in their sights. I ran inside, slammed the door. The lights snapped back on. The man and woman by the pumps were gone. The rigs had vanished too, leaving. Only the scorched highway and a chill so deep it made my bones ache. Maggie backed away, eyes wide. They're headed there, I managed. Back through that 6-mile stretch into town. Her face contorted. But how? They can't stop. Not until they fill their ranks. I grabbed her hand, voice sharp. We have to warn them. Outside, the sun stared over the mesquite line, fat and merciless. I killed the diner's coffee machine black coffee for driving, 2 pots steaming. Maggie called Dad. He stumbled in, eyes red, muttering about engine troubles. I dragged him to the door. They're coming. I shouted. A convoy of rigs, soulless rigs headed right into town. He laughed, angry. You're delirious. It's sunrise. Nothing's out there, I pointed. Down the cracked ribbon of highway, 4 rigs emerged, headlights on, engines humming a funeral dirge. The scorched path glowed like old scars. Town stirred, the diner's neon flickered, the church bell chimed an unseasonal warning, and somewhere a dog bayed. I caught Maggie's shoulder. Load the CB. Tell every trucker you see. Warn them to block the road. She hesitated, Then, sprinted to the counter. I stepped onto the porch. The rigs rolled closer, dust coiling at their wheels. Each one carried a name scrawled on the doors in soot, names of missing drivers. Whispered legends, names I recognized from obituaries. Big Joe Mercer, Earl Hightower, Louise Mayfield. They were real people. And now they were coming. I raised my voice. "Leave this highway. Turn back." I heard the distant roar of pickups answering the call. Taillights flickered through the desert haze, engines revving in defiance. The rigs hesitated, rumble fading, as if unsure. I felt hope surge, like maybe, just maybe, I could stop this. But then the nearest rig's headlight flared, unblinking, and the scorched ribbon jumped forward, swallowing the smaller trucks, crushing them in a wave of black fire. The heat washed over me, and I stumbled, eyes watering. Maggie's scream tore the air as she yanked me back inside just before the fireball engulfed the porch, leaving only ash and embers dancing in the morning light. We sat on the spotless floor, charred wood, crackling, huddled in the broken silence. Outside, all was calm. No rigs, no scorch marks, just the empty highway and the dawn creeping across the plains. The sun was merciless, bleaching the world clean, erasing the horrors of night. And in that silence, I realized the rigs hadn't stopped in town. They didn't need to. They were the highway, and the highway was in me now. Every mile I drove from here on would carry them toward the next place, the next town, the next set of unsuspecting souls. And there was nothing anyone could do but wait, watch, and pray they didn't arrive screaming down the road at 3 in the morning, leaving only a black scar in their wake.